pushing my dreams to the side of me. 'Cause they can't love me like you do. I give you my all. I give you my all. And I'm not running anymore. I give you my all. I'm giving you all of me, all of me. Oh, I give you my all. Yeah, I'm not running anymore. Oh, I give you my all. I'm giving you all of me, all of me. Father, I need you to search my heart. Coming on back to surrender. Show me where to start. Yeah, all I want is to be abiding. 'Cause you show me a different view. What I had was less exciting. 'Cause dreams don't love me like you do. I give you my all. Hey, I give you my all. I'm not running anymore. No, 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 no. I give you my all. I'm giving you all of me, all of me. Oh, I give you my all. And I'm not running anymore. No, 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 no. I give you my all. I'm giving you all of me, all of me. Pause. Why would I make plans? Push away your hands. Alone I can't stand. Stop. Your plan is my choice. Tune out all the noise. I can hear your voice. And I don't wanna run. No. I don't want control. I don't wanna run. I don't want control. No, no, no. I give you my all. I give you my all. Yeah, I'm not running anymore. No, I give you my all. I'm giving you all of me, all of me. I give you my all. I'm not running anymore. No, 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 no. I give you my all. Giving you all of me, all of me.
Jesus is the greatest treasure. He far outshines our earthly pleasure. Every thirst my soul encounters finds its fill inside his fountain. Lay aside my earthly crutches. Let me dwell within his clutches. Bring to mind his faithful promise. In our weakness, he is strongest. Our inheritance is not a place where moth and rust destroy. cure our blindness. Our inheritance is not a place where moth and rust destroy. The kingdom is his righteousness through perfect peace and joy. Our inheritance is not a place where moth and rust destroy. The kingdom is his righteousness through perfect peace and joy. Eternally satisfied, you're everything my heart is searching for. He alone will bring you peace, abundant life for those who seek. He alone will bring you peace, yeah. Abundant life for those who seek. He alone will bring you peace. Abundant life for those who seek. Eternally satisfied, you're everything my heart is searching for. The heritage is not a place where moth and rust destroy. The kingdom is his righteousness through perfect peace and joy. Our inheritance is not a place where moth and rust destroy. The kingdom is his righteousness through perfect peace and joy. Eternally satisfied, you're everything my heart is searching for. This is the love you have for me, that dies for the other. This is the love you have for me. It lays its life down for a brother. You died to be close to me. You died to be close to me. You died to be close to me. You just wanna be close to me. This is the love you have for me, that dies for the other. This is the love you have for me. It lays its life down for a brother. You died to be close to me. You died to be close to me. You died to be close to me. You just wanna be close to me. Found me. I hear you say, I love you, I love you, I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you. You paid it all for me. How can I say anything but I love you, I love you, I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you. You've given me your identity. You're clothing me in royalty. I love you, I love you, I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you. You paid it all for me. How can I say anything but I love you, I love you, I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you. You've given me your identity. You're clothing me in royalty. I love you, I love you, I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you. Yeah.
From the East Coast to the West Coast, down the Dixie Highway.
Hey, great job. You did just as I asked. You came back on time. Jesus Christ is coming back for a group just like this who are ready. Bless you. Y'all have a good lunch? How many of you went to one of the food trucks? Raise your hand or shout amen. Did they have an In-N-Out burger one there? How many are In-N-Out fans? In-N-Out burger. Yeah, chef salad on a bun if you ask me. I'm sorry. I'm not a member of that cult. Just about every other one. How about White Castles? You guys got White Castles up here? What do you mean, no? Who cares what you think? More for me if you don't like White Castles. All right, everybody. Well, listen, we have got an action-packed afternoon that we want to get started on right away. We want to share another story about one of our great exhibitors. This one is called Pro-Love. Let's take a look at it right now.
I'm a woman who's had an abortion. I've been in an abortion clinic. I've sat on the table, and I know what it's like to be in a position where you feel like you have no choice.
Pro-Love is a ministry that I founded to primarily fill gaps in the pro-life movement.
I have a heart to see women empowered. I have a heart to see women healed. Many of the women that we serve are just like me. And so I want to give them hope. I want them to know that abortion isn't the answer. And I want to serve them, and I want to serve them well.
It's going to require, though, for all of us to step in and to fill some of those gaps and to meet these women where they are and to walk alongside them in this journey.
We're looking forward, and we're hoping for a post-Roe America. So we want to pool our resources and come together and steward them well to be able to serve women all over this great nation. And I believe that if we lead with love, then we're guaranteed victory.
One of the things that was said to me by my boss when I left Planned Parenthood is that I had made an enemy of one of the most powerful organizations on the planet. But that's such a lie, because the most powerful organization on the planet is the church. We can make a difference.
For Pro-Love Ministries, the wonderful work that they're doing, they need your support as well. Also want to make mention of a Together for Life event that's going to be coming up Sunday, November the 28th at 7 o'clock Central Time. Join us as we unite in prayer for the upcoming Supreme Court case, Dobbs v. Jackson, for women's health. Folks, this one literally could be the one that begins to break down Roe v. Wade. And so we want to just make this a matter of real prayer. This is much more than just a political battle. This is a spiritual battle where we need things released in the heavenlies. And we can do that through prayer. So we'll be telling you more about that, but I just wanted to mention this is coming up November the 28th at 7 o'clock, Together for Life. We'll be sharing, again, more details about that. For now, we want to look at the end of Roe and beyond, the outlook for the unborn in America. We have an amazing panel that you are absolutely going to love. And moderating this panel is Mary Zock. She serves as the director of the Center for Human Dignity at Family Research Council, where she manages issues from birth to natural death. She's a graduate of Notre Dame, the former director of the D.C. Catholic Conference, and the manager of Catholic Policy and Advocacy for the Archdiocese of Washington. And I might also add, a brand new mama herself. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome our panel and moderator, Mary Zock.
Good afternoon. It is such a joy to be here with you today and to be part of this panel. Today we have 4 incredible speakers on our panel, and they will be setting the stage and letting you know what we need to be focused on for the future of America after Dobbs. First on our panel is Josh Hammer. Josh is the opinion editor of Newsweek, a research fellow with the Edmund Burke Foundation, counsel and policy advisor for the Internet Accountability Project, a syndicate columnist through Creators, and a contributing editor for Anchoring Truths. Josh is a constitutional attorney by training and the co-host of 2 podcasts, Newsweek's The Debate and the Edmund Burke Foundation's NatCon Squad. Josh has been published by, well, just about everyone who's worth reading. And he's also a legal scholar who has been published by the Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy and the University of St. Thomas Law Journal. He's a campus speaker through Young America's Foundation and a law school campus speaker through the Federalist Project. Josh previously worked at a large law firm and clerked for a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals. We welcome Josh Hammer. Also on our panel today will be Kurt Kondrich. Kurt is from Pennsylvania, my home state, the father of Chloe and Noland and husband of Margie. Kurt served 20 years as a police officer before becoming a full-time advocate for the most vulnerable among us. Kurt has spoken twice before the UN on the genocide against babies with Down syndrome. Along with his family, he has received numerous awards, including the Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation Leadership Award, the Diocese of Pittsburgh St. Anthony Award, the Array of Hope John Paul II Threshold of Hope Award, and many others. Kurt championed Pennsylvania's Chloe Law and Bill 321, which would have outlawed abortion on the basis of a prenatal diagnosis of Down syndrome in the womb. Unfortunately, that bill was vetoed by Governor Tom Wolf. Kurt's favorite Bible verse is Proverbs 31:8. Speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. We welcome Kurt. Joining Kurt is his daughter, Chloe Condrich, and she is going to be the star of our show today. Chloe is 18 years old, also from Pennsylvania, daughter of Kurt and Margie. Chloe learned to read at age 3 with the help of her brother Nolan, and it has only gone up from there. She has met with numerous state and federal legislators, lobbying for several pieces of legislation aiding those inside the womb and those outside the womb. Chloe spoke at the UN in 2017 and again in 2018. She appeared with President Trump in the Rose Garden, and Chloe's picture with Vice President Pence hung in the West Wing. When she's not advocating for life, Chloe enjoys basketball, golf, volleyball, and baseball. Welcome, Chloe. And finally on our panel, we have Allison Centofonte, who is a child advocacy innovator, in-demand public speaker, activist, and writer with over 10 years of experience speaking on abortion, marriage, human dignity, and religious freedom. Allison has been featured on Fox News, ABC, NPR, the Christian Broadcasting Network, and other national and international media outlets. Most recently, Allison served as the director of external affairs at Live Action, a nonprofit organization with the largest digital footprint in the global pro-life movement. Prior to that, Allison served as the director of alliance relations at Alliance Defending Freedom, where she worked to protect religious freedom, free speech, marriage, family, parental rights, and the sanctity of life. Allison has been named to Red Alert Politics 30 Under 30, Christianity Today's 33 Under 33. We welcome Allison Centofonte. So what we'd like to have today is just a conversation with these experts in the legal field, the lobbying world, and the culture of the pro-life culture of America. We'd like to have a conversation about the future of life in America. So to start us off, Josh, where are we right now? What did Roe do, and how could that change in the future?
So thank you so much for having me, to you and obviously to Family Research Council. It's just such a fabulous organization. I'm so happy to be here. So, look, this is a very well-informed audience. I don't think I need to spend too much time on telling y'all what Roe versus Wade did. Roe is obviously the 1973 decision. The court, by 7-2 count, established the so-called constitutional right for a woman to procure an abortion. I don't need to tell you guys, this right is nowhere to be found in the text, structure, or history of the 14th Amendment. It is contrary to every sound principle of constitutional interpretation and basic moral reasoning under the sun. From my perspective, it is the worst constitutional decision since the Dred Scott decision of 1857. 19 years after Roe versus Wade in 1992, the court, for the first time, had a direct chance to overturn Roe in the Planned Parenthood versus Casey case. And at the time, most legal observers and court watchers actually thought that Roe would be overturned. Republicans had, at the time, a 6-3 majority of justices from their party on the court, and one of the Democratic nominees, Byron White, was actually one of the 2 dissenters in Roe versus Wade. Again, you're a well-informed audience, don't need to spend too much more time on this. We know how that ended by a 5-4 court. The thrust of the constitutional right holding from Roe was upheld. The court in Casey basically said that we maintain the essence of the Roe holding. They slightly reformulated it. The actual holding of Casey is that a state cannot have a, quote, undue burden on a woman's, quote unquote, right to have an abortion up until, quote unquote, fetal viability. I'm using a lot of scare quotes here because they're not really real concepts, obviously. The court next had an opportunity to significantly pare back Casey in a 2016 case called Whole Women's Health versus Hellerstedt. They did not do so. They reaffirmed yet again Roe and Casey, the undue burden standard. But we will now fast forward, and I'll stop here, and I think we're going to get to it a little later. But obviously, this term is the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health case, where Roe and Casey are yet again directly in the court's crosshairs. So it's a very exciting time. We have another shot this term to take our stab at Roe and Casey. And I think we'll get to that a little later, so I'll cut myself off there.
Great. So as Josh said, Roe created this environment where abortion through 9 months of pregnancy is the law of the land in the United States. Allison, can you talk to us a little bit about the culture that this created in America?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I just want to first advocate for maybe Josh to be on Supreme Court one day. Can I get a round of applause for that? It would be really nice to have a good pro-life constitutional attorney on the court. I just actually flew in and I landed at IAD, and there's a woman on the train with me, and she was 8 months pregnant. She's a beautiful black woman, incredibly pregnant. I don't actually know how she flew, but I just looked at her on my way here and I'm thinking, she could absolutely abort that child if she wanted to. That's what Roe did. Roe created a society where if a woman at 8 months says, no, I changed my mind, that she could kill that child, even though there are over 100,000 families waiting to adopt an infant. I like to point that out. There's over 100,000 families ready to adopt an infant that can't because of the supply and demand issue that abortion has created. That's something huge we should talk about. Roe has led to over 60 million children being killed in utero. That number is almost too big for us to comprehend. Attached to that baby is a mom and a dad that have lost their chance at motherhood and fatherhood. And in a room of this size, and those watching online, I want to advocate and remind us all that some of us are post-abortive, men included, and that there's healing and that there's forgiveness. And we need you to be a part of this fight. We need you to tell your story. We don't want you hiding in the shadows or ashamed. I meet a lot of post-abortive women in the work I do, and they feel like, the left says there's nothing there for you to mourn. And they know that's not true. But the right can come off and say, you murdered your child, and they don't feel safe to share that with us. So we need to be a place of love and of forgiveness and healing, because our culture right now is not. Abortion has created, we say this term all the time, a culture of death. But it's a laissez-faire view of human dignity. We are so concerned about human rights, tolerance, inclusivity, but we don't apply that to the preborn child. We don't apply those same concerns for their life, their potential in this world. And that's why I'm so glad Kurt and Chloe are here today, because it's always shocking to tell people, they don't realize, but in the United States today, you can abort your child for their race, their sex, their disability. Those are all legal. You can absolutely abort your child and just say, I didn't want a girl, or it's a black child, or the baby has Down syndrome. And so we need to work big time, no matter what happens in Dobbs, to get these pro-life bills passed and persuade our family and friends to support them too.
Thank you so much for that, Allison. And as you mentioned, we do have this focus in America today on tolerance and acceptance and inclusivity. Kurt, you have been an advocate for the past 18 years for actual tolerance, actual inclusivity, and an actual celebration of people. Tell us a little bit about the work that you've been doing.
Sure, thank you. I want to thank Family Research Council again for inviting us to come today and to share our story. They do amazing work, and please support the work that they do, because they are a loud voice. They're light in the darkness for the culture we live in. I want to thank you all for coming out today, and thank my beautiful daughter Chloe for making this trip with me. So when my wife was pregnant with Chloe at the time, we were 40 years old. We actually didn't think we'd have another child, but God had other plans. But during the pregnancy, I was a city police officer, and every time we went for an appointment, they kept offering us prenatal testing. And we were told at the time we were high risk. Everybody knows that's not a pleasant word. We were at risk to have a child with Down syndrome. And as a police officer, I just, I have an inquiry mind. I said, well, okay, so what does that mean? They go, well, you can get the prenatal test. And I said, well, what does that mean? Well, you can find out if you're having a child with Down syndrome. And I said, okay, so what does that mean? I said, well, then you can decide whether you want to keep your child or not. So here I am, a city police officer. I'm in the hospital in the city of Pittsburgh, and I have medical professionals telling me that, and if anybody walks in that hospital with a weapon or whatever, I'm going to defend people. But I have people telling me, hey, listen, if you don't like the makeup of your child, you can terminate your child right here and get rid of them and, whatever. So we did not have prenatal testing. My beautiful wife, Margie, gave birth to Chloe, and May 16th, 2003, we had a postnatal diagnosis of Down syndrome. And as was said earlier, this prenatal, it's a genocide, make no marks about it. When people identify, target, and terminate a human being because they don't meet the cultural mandate, misguided cultural mandate for perfection, it's the ultimate extreme form of intolerance, prejudice, bigotry, hate. It's actually capital punishment without even a jury. People are so big about making sure that we don't execute somebody who's not guilty. Well, this is the ultimate execution of people who are innocent. And when Chloe was born, I learned about this. Like I said, I was a bee cop. That's what it was. I did like donuts. I will share with you. So I want to break down that myth. We do like donuts, please. But when she was born, I dialogued with parents. I kept hearing everybody saying that when they got the prenatal test, everybody I spoke to, and I speak all over the country, and we speak all over the world, they told me that the moment they got the diagnosis of Down syndrome, they were told, practically handed a slip, okay, go take care of this, basically. And that appalled me. So like I said, I had 20 years serving as a police officer. I remember telling my wife, I said, I got to stop this. And I remember she saying, what are you going to do about it? I said, I don't know what I'm going to do about it, but I can't sit back while they're doing this. Just as was mentioned, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, silence in the face of evil is evil. Not to act is to act, not to speak is to speak. So Chloe and I just began speaking out. We began going to our state capitol and educating people on the abilities of people with Down syndrome. My daughter is not disabled. If I want to see somebody who's disabled and really messed up, I just go to the mirror, to be honest with you, because that's where I'll see the most disabled person. My daughter is not. She doesn't have malice. She doesn't have evil. She'll have a mansion in heaven. I'll clean the driveway. She brings into our culture the things that we need more than ever right now, which is love and purity and innocence and kindness. And she doesn't judge you based on anything, where you live, who you are, what your background is. She'll love you because you're a human being. And I really believe that's why the devil uses the instrument of abortion to wipe out children like my daughter. And when we started our advocacy, I thought, well, as genetic testing rapidly advances, we keep hearing that depression is genetic. Well, they get rid of me then. How about autism? How about baldness? How about being short? How about all these things? Let's just wipe everybody out that doesn't meet the cultural mandate. So it's a very slippery slope. So we began advocating, we began speaking, and I always say that our mission, we're the instrument, God is the master craftsman. He just began using us. He kept opening doors. That's why we're here today, to get this message out about this prenatal genocide and about how it has to be stopped. And, we were blessed in Pennsylvania. We were able to get a law called the Prenatal Down Syndrome Education Act that Chloe met with everybody, Republican, Democrat, because this isn't a political issue. When people say, well, there's no politics, this is not Republican, this is not Democrat, this is not conservative, this is not liberal, this is human beings. If you can't look at my daughter, that's why I take her everywhere with me, and meet my daughter, and I hope you can meet her after we're done talking here, and see the goodness she brings to this world, and you're clearly blind. This is a human issue. This is an issue about we as people surviving. So we did our advocacy in Pennsylvania in 2014. They passed this law within 6 months of us beginning to advocate for it. So if anybody knows about Pennsylvania, you can't get a law passed in 10 years to change a stop sign. But we got the Down Syndrome Act passed in Pennsylvania. They dubbed it Chloe's Law, and she signed it on the governor's desk next to Governor Corbett, and her name was forever on that law. And that makes sure that when a woman gets a diagnosis, instead of just being told to abort, she's given factual, supportive information. And as was said, we want to make abortion illegal for Down syndrome. That's what we work for. We speak all over the world, the country, United Nations. And Chloe was invited to the White House and President Trump there. What did President Trump do to you when you were at the White House for the Right for Life? What did he do?
Kiss me in the head.
He kissed you on the head. So, and put her picture up. And when you tell people what Jesus, when you were made in the womb, and I tell Chloe how we talked to her, and her brother talked to her in the womb. He was 4 at the time. What did Jesus do? What did he make you?
Made me perfect.
Jesus made her perfect. That's what I always tell people. People with Down syndrome have an extra chromosome. I wrote an article once. I said Adam and Eve had Down syndrome until the devil stole the extra chromosome. because she's a visual of how we were supposed to be on this earth, and we're a visual of how what we've morphed into, which hasn't been very pleasant. So I'll continue to share the stuff we've done as we go around. Like, again, I just want to thank this awesome panel and for allowing us. Our most precious, sacred, priceless national treasure is not oil, it's not gold, it's human life. And if we do not defend and protect... As was said earlier, my favorite Bible verse is Proverbs 31:8, speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. And I will share with you, if you want to see after, I do have that tattooed on my arm because it has to remind me every day when I get up that that's the reason God placed me on this earth. So thank you again, and we'll just continue our conversation.
So as Kurt mentioned, he and Chloe go around the world and advocate for unborn babies with Downs in the womb and unborn babies in general in the womb. But the abortion of people with Downs, specifically because they have Downs, is allowed under Roe right now in America, as Allison mentioned. And as Josh alluded to at the beginning, we do have a chance to change that. We have the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Supreme Court case that is coming up. It'll be heard December 1st. And this case will challenge whether or not all bans on abortion prior to viability are unconstitutional. Josh, can you tell us a little bit more about what that case could do?
Yeah, absolutely. So real quick, though, I want to just briefly talk about the Down syndrome situation in this country, which is just beyond horrific, obviously. So I'm Jewish, and this is somewhat personal to me, actually, because this is just straight up eugenics. It is literally just eugenics. Obviously, a lot of us are familiar with kind of the early writings of Margaret Sanger, who, of course, the founder of Planned Parenthood, who, of course, was a vitriolic racist and was a proponent of race-based eugenics. This was kind of a lot of kind of the overarching purpose of kind of early advocacy for abortion and, to an extent, advocacy for birth control as well. And it was a lot of these kind of early stage 1920s era eugenicist writings that the early Nazis in the 1920s and early 1930s really kind of latched onto. In fact, really, the Nazi Party in the 1930s, before they kind of started building the death camps and all of that, they started with eugenicist-style experimentation on what the Nazis would call, I'm not going to try to pronounce the German, life unworthy of life. So we currently today are dealing with the remnants of this horrific legacy. There are countries like Iceland that are effectively trying to just eliminate Down syndrome. So just God bless you in what you're doing, because it really is just so important. But to get back to the Dobbs case. So Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health is a case out of the state of Mississippi. It's out of Jackson, Mississippi. It comes out of the court that I previously clerked on. I clerked on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, which has appellate jurisdiction over Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. The judge that I clerked for, actually Judge James C. Ho, I should probably say to be a little more formal, was actually on the panel. He said that he was forced to concur because of binding Supreme Court precedent, but he said very clearly, in no uncertain terms, that there is no constitutional right to abortion, that all of this is totally wrong here. So the Dobbs case in Mississippi pertains to a Mississippi state statute that effectively bans abortions at 15 weeks gestational period. There are some limited dispensations, some limited exceptions for extreme life and health of the mother situations, but it's basically, for all intents and purposes, a straight up 15-week abortion ban. And the question presented to the Supreme Court in this litigation, the QP and kind of legalese and lawyer speak, is whether all pre-viability prohibitions on abortion are unconstitutional. Now, that is basically a direct challenge to Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which, as I was saying earlier, is the 1992 case that held that for pre-viability abortions, a state cannot implement a, quote, undue burden on the woman's purported right to procure an abortion. So it's very difficult to view the Jackson versus Women's Health case as anything other than a direct challenge to Casey and by extension, Roe. Now, facially, it's very exciting, obviously. We have a 6-3 Republican nominated majority. We could go justice by justice. Obviously, Chief Justice Roberts, not exactly the strongest conservative, to put it mildly here. I basically see 4 possible ways for the court to go in the Dobbs case. The first case, which is by far the worst case scenario, and I do not predict this will happen, is if they simply affirm the Fifth Circuit and the Mississippi statute is overturned. I don't think that's going to happen. For starters, it takes 4 votes to grant a writ of certiorari and hear a case in the first place. So if there's 4 votes to hear the case, the odds are, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to hear the case, only to affirm it. We just kind of had the whole Women's versus Hellerstedt case in 2016. They've already affirmed this. So if they're going to hear another case, it makes sense that they would do something other than just affirm the status quo. So that's the worst case scenario. One thing that they could do, and this is intellectually disingenuous to the extreme, but the court is nothing if not intellectually disingenuous when it comes to abortion jurisprudence here. They could purport to affirm the undue burden standard of Casey and simply say that the state of embryology and prenatal science has advanced in the past 30 years such that a 15-week abortion ban does not constitute an undue burden standard. So they could try to kind of have it both ways. I could see a world in which a Brett Kavanaugh might try to go there, kind of some of the swing justices. The other 2 options are the best possible option, of course, which is just straight up overturn Roe and Casey, gut all of this garbage, and return this issue to the states where it belongs. Ideally, of course, be constitutionally protected under the 14th Amendment, but at least kick it back to the states. And then the other thing they could do, which is also intellectually dishonest probably, but again, they could do it, is they could modify the Casey undue burden standard and basically concoct a new middle ground standard that affirms Roe's constitutional right, but fabricates some new standard, and it would just be a fabrication. This is nowhere in the constitutional text. We're in no man's uncharted waters at this point. They could just fabricate a new standard that would say the 15-week ban is constitutional for Mississippi to do, but maintains the core of Roe. So those are basically the 4 options, I think.
So we do have those 4 options, and we're hoping and we're praying, and it is really important to emphasize we do need to be praying every single day for our Supreme Court justices, for their courage, for their adherence to intellectual honesty, and for their safety. We need to be praying for our Supreme Court justices to stand up for life in the womb and to stand up for our Constitution. Along those lines, our culture has brought us to this point. There have been shifts since 1973. We're not in the same place that we were. In 1973, babies who were just born, newborn babies, I have a 12-week-old little boy. 12-week-old little boys would have been operated on without anesthesia in 1973 because our medical science hadn't advanced to the point where we recognized that newborn babies could feel pain. Today, we have advanced so far that we recognize that babies in the womb can feel pain. And so when we're operating on a child in the womb, we're using anesthesia or we're using pain medication for that child, a separate pain medication from what its mother gets. Our medical field recognizes that those are 2 separate people and that they deserve separate care as separate patients. This is one of the advances that I believe has brought us to this point where we see a Supreme Court challenge to Roe. Allison, can you talk about some of the other cultural changes?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the first question you asked me was, where are we at as a culture? And I was thinking as I'm sitting here, well, we just saw the Women's March, right? You guys saw how angry and terrible that was, the way people were treating each other, pro-aborts treating pro-lifers. And I just think, as a young woman, it is so sad for me to see women so angry and so hurting, but it's because, and I've thought about this a lot, we can wake up and fight for life, but how do you wake up and fight for abortion? If you've ever seen an abortion procedure, and I encourage you to do it if you haven't, abortionprocedures.com is a medically animated one. It's not bloody or gory, but it'll show you from an abortionist what happens. If you see that, how do you wake up and fight for it? And a mentor of mine who had served in this movement for decades, and many of you here have too, so thank you. We stand on your shoulders, thank you. You fought in 1974. I thank you for that. She said, it's because the left has sold this lie to women that the only way to be successful is to be pitted against your child and to have the equal opportunity to be free of a child in the same way if a man has carefree casual sex, we should have carefree casual sex. And so therefore women are angry at the very thought of being, abortion being removed. And so you have young women my age, you have Billie Eilish, and all of these amazing people that have mega platforms, that instead of saying, I am woman, hear me roar, I can do it all, support me and my family, and I can have children, you can't. That's where we could be if the women's movement didn't adopt this pro-abortion rhetoric way back in the Mayflower Hotel decades ago, because that was a fight, by the way. And I want to come back to that. But it wasn't always like this. The women's rights movement didn't always have abortion in their platform. There was a big fight at the Mayflower Hotel, and Sue Ellen Browder writes about this in her book Subverted, which I can't encourage you enough to get. But a lot of Christian women walked out and said, I will not be a part of this if you adopt abortion. And ultimately, abortion was taken in. And I always like to think, I want you to think, what kind of society would we live in today if that meeting went differently? Would Mary, with her 12-week-old child, be completely surrounded by support at work, at home, at church? Me with a 1.5-year-old, Chloe and all of her friends? Our society would look different because women would have demanded true equality. Not that we're asked to kill our children in order to play in this game of the economy in our society. That's why women are angry. On the left, I will pivot and say, you're seeing a new generation of pro-lifers, and I'm so proud of them. High school students, college students. We, in the movement, have younger than high school asking to work for us, and we're like, we can't employ you, like you're not old enough yet. They have seen 4D technology. They have seen their siblings. They are more well-connected than ever. They know what an abortion does to a child. They've heard the stories of post-abortive men and women that have been brave enough to share those stories. And they know now, thanks to the work of so many groups, FRC, publications like Newsweek, advocates, activists, you guys, viability is an ever-changing line. That's something that Attorney General Lynn Fitch did an amazing job in her amicus brief to the Supreme Court. If you guys want to take a look, it's actually a really easy read for an amicus brief. Lynn Fitch, you guys should pray for her. She is a wonderful warrior woman, and she held nothing back in her appeal to the court. She called Roe and Casey, was it egregiously wrong? Egregiously wrong. And she said this line of viability in 1973 was closer to 24 weeks. Now we know that babies can survive at 20, 21 weeks. We pray for them and our fingers are crossed and we give them all the help that they need. But if that's going to be your standard, well, that's changing and now we have to reconsider. And so we're proud of what Mississippi's doing. And I'm incredibly proud of the fact that whatever happens in Dobbs, and we're going to fight and pray for these justices to go the right way. If you're a praying person in this room, I want you to dedicate this next couple of months to praying for our justices. There will be an all-out assault for them over the next couple of months from a very well-funded left. They know what's at stake here. This will be an attack on their livelihood as a pro-abortion movement, which, you guys, it's a well-funded movement because guess who makes money in this fight for life? Abortionists see a woman walk in that's pregnant and they see an opportunity to make money. Abortions can cost upwards of $10,000. They make money off of this. They get government grants. We didn't even talk about that, but Planned Parenthood is well funded by our taxpayer dollars. So if you sit here today, I want you to pray for our justices that they would be convicted, that they would read the right things, that they would stand strong. We think we know how they might go on this, but it's all speculation. Anything could happen. And this is a moment in history that they could really change the tides. But no matter what happens at the court, we as activists, we as pro-life individuals, we have to make sure that we're doing everything in our personal lives so that if people are pregnant in an unplanned pregnancy, they can come to us, they know it's safe. One quick thing I will encourage you to do is every once in a while, just post on social media. If you find yourself in an unplanned pregnancy, I want you to know it's safe to talk to me. I can't tell you how many times I've encouraged young people to put that out and girlfriends reach out in the next year and say, hey, I remember that still, can we talk? Stuff like that. Get involved in your local community. I mean, if Dobbs has Roe v. Wade overturned and it goes back to the states, I know you guys are spread out and from all over. Your local legislators should know your name. They should know what your priority is. They represent you. So I want you to just be encouraged. I know we've all been in this fight for a long time. It's like, does a phone call really matter? It does. These offices will judge one phone call and count it as either 100 or 1,000 based off of the demographic of your area. So each call does matter. It represents sometimes thousands of people. That's how they kind of rate it internally. And continue to support local pregnancy resource centers, support pro-life organizations. We're already funding the abortion industry, guys, with our taxpayer dollars. We need to do everything we can to make sure that our feet are on the ground and our finances are where our priorities lie.
I love that call to action, Allison. And I know that you talked about how could you possibly wake up each day and fight for abortion. And I think there must just be such deep pain there, pain that needs to meet the healing touch of Christ. And we can be that person who reaches out and invites others in to recognize God's mercy and his love that is there for everyone, including those women and men who are post-abortive. I think the flip side of that is we have to be the party of joy. And you said, legislators need to know your name. Well, one name that the legislators in Pennsylvania know is Chloe's, right? And all of those legislators know Chloe's name, and they know that she brings joy when she walks into the room. Chloe, do you think that these people need to be afraid to talk to legislators? Is it scary? No. Can you say that a little louder for them?
Nope.
No. No. Do you think that they could all make a phone call to their legislator and tell them to protect the unborn in the womb?
Yes.
So you heard it from Chloe. If they know Chloe's name, they've got to know yours too.
And I do, when we were advocating for Chloe's law in Pennsylvania, we met with every Republican, every Democrat, senator, and member of the House, and very diverse. If you know Pennsylvania, it's just like Virginia. It's a very diverse state. And I swear it was almost like the Christmas story. She was the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future. And even one of the legislators who normally doesn't vote on things like Chloe's law said, you really haunted me by bringing her in here and showing me her, having to see her face as opposed to just seeing statistics. And statistics are very powerful, but there's nothing more powerful than seeing the actual face of a human being. When we spoke at the United Nations the 2 years in 17 and 18, it was because Iceland came out and proudly proclaimed that they had cured Down syndrome. I don't know if you heard that. You know how they cured Down syndrome? They got rid of every single person who was diagnosed prenatally with Down syndrome. So these are issues. These are real issues. And when we woke up this morning, the first thing Chloe wanted to know was, where are we at today? What's the name of this place? What's this called?
Pray, vote, and stand.
She said, Dad, we going to pray, vote, and stand. Now, I want you to remember those words when you leave this summit, because that's what we have to do. We have to pray. We have to vote, but we have to stand. We have to be visible. We have to be a force out there. The old saying, God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. Chloe and I are the least qualified to be here in the States today. Like I said, I was a B Cop. I don't have any spectacular educational background. I wasn't raised in wealth or anything. I just devoted my life to being a police officer because I wanted to defend and protect people. And when you see an injustice happening out there, as Christians, as followers of Christ, we are called to act. We are called to go into action. David went into action. Jonah went into action. Moses went into action. We're no different. We are called to be people of action, people of faith. And if we were sitting here in Leesburg, Virginia, and it was 1850, and we weren't discussing the issue of slavery and how horrible it is and how we're going to stop it as the church, as Christians, then we are basically the lukewarm church that was described in the book of Revelations. If we were sitting here in, the 1940s and it was Germany and we were talking about the Holocaust and the trains going through town with people on them, then we're the lukewarm church that God basically vomits because they're not a church of action. Well, we're sitting here, it's 2021, and that's interesting because 21 represents the triplication of the 21st chromosome for Down syndrome. And the issue today that we're sitting here about is abortion. And here's something I picked up when Chloe and I spoke at the National Right to Life Conference in Charleston. I like statistics. I was a dragnet kid growing up, just the facts, ma'am. This is the abortion worldwide report for the past century. 100 nations, 1 billion babies. This is the report. This is the crime report. This is the death report. And if this isn't something to call action, to be praying about, to be voting about, and to be standing about, then I don't know what is. And I believe that all of us will be held accountable since God placed us in this moment of time for this reason. We're here. We're not here by chance. We're here because God's choice. He chose to put us here. And it's our duty as followers of Jesus Christ to get out there and to be a loud voice and to speak loudly about things that are happening and are going on. And the other thing sometimes I flip around a little bit. That's just from working night shift for 10 years. But, when I talk about 1973, what's really interesting, if you go down to Virginia Beach and there's a bunch of sea turtle eggs in a nest, and you go down there and destroy them, I can guarantee you're going to probably be locked up, face severe penalties, and end up taken away. In Pittsburgh, we have some eagle nests. If you go down there and you break one of those eggs or disturb it or break the nest, I can guarantee you, because there's cameras on it, you'll be arrested and taken away to jail. What is an egg? It's because these animals are endangered. Well, my daughter's endangered. She's an endangered species. And what is an egg? An egg is a prenatal animal. So if you go out and destroy a prenatal animal that's endangered, like I said, you're going to get a knock at your door from law enforcement officials. Well, my daughter, I love animals, don't get me wrong, but I love people more. And individuals like my Chloe, like I said, there are countries that have wiped them out. You won't find any people with Down syndrome. And if that doesn't disturb you, and if that doesn't make you think about advocating and speaking out, then I don't really know what else will. And like I said, I hope you can meet my Chloe after this. And this is the book she gives out to everybody. It's called Brilliant Souls. It's about people with Down syndrome and all the good they have. And I'd be glad to get you a copy if you'd like a copy of it, because we are living in a moment of history. If Mary and Allison's young children have a future, it's going to be because of what we do today. And I want them to have a bright future, but we have to act. We have to stand, we have to vote, and we have to speak up, because if we don't, then we're going to look back and we're going to really regret this moment of history that we didn't do anything for it. So, just once again, just encourage you to be mouths and voices of truth, of light, and of reason in this world.
So if this election taught us anything, it's that your vote matters, and like you've said, we've got to stand up, we have to do something. We said that the best case scenario out of the Supreme Court with Dobbs is that, abortion goes back to the states, basically. Is there anything else we can do? I don't think we can just stand idly by while California allows abortion through 9 months of pregnancy. Is there anything else at the federal level we can do to be a nation that actually protects the unborn children as much as we protect, the endangered animals?
So the first thing is I just want to endorse what has already been said here, which is everyone who is a person of faith needs to pray. Literally as much as you can between now and next June when the Dobbs case will come down. If you believe in prayer, if you believe in that power, then there is no excuse for not doing so. There's really not. So I just completely endorse what has been said on that front. As far as what we can do, I do not predict the worst. I do not predict that the court is simply going to overturn the Mississippi statute. I think that we'll have something in the correct direction. But for the sake of argument, let's operate under the presumption that the worst case is going to happen. Let's say that the Mississippi statute is overturned, that Roe and Casey are just completely the law of the land. So what can we actually advocate for from kind of a policy and legal perspective? So there's a few things, right? One is there's been a resurgence of thought in some legal conservative schools of thought. I've been part of this. I'm actually going back to my law school alma mater, University of Chicago Law School, in about 2 weeks to debate this very topic, is whether the 14th Amendment properly construed does actually simply leave abortion to the states, or whether the actual language of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment actually bans abortion. Straight up. The basic argument is that unborn children were persons recognized under the English common law. 1868 was when the 14th Amendment was ratified, so a state cannot discriminate between born and unborn persons. That would be a violation of the Equal Protection Clause. I'm debating this very proposition at my law school alma mater in 2 weeks. Wish me luck. But some of us are now kind of pushing this. I think it's right, legally speaking, but as a pure tactical matter, it's also kind of a good thing to kind of push that argument, because then the kind of standard leave it to the state's position looks kind of moderate, fairly milquetoast actually by comparison. So I would encourage you to kind of read up on that argument. There's a fabulous 2017 article that a dear friend of mine named Josh Craddock wrote for the Harvard Journal of Law and Public Policy, making the case for constitutional personhood. It's 30 pages. I mean, he's a lawyer, obviously, but it's just like the amicus brief from Attorney General Fitch. It's fairly easy to work your way through, so I'd encourage you guys to read up on that. Beyond that, there are a few other things we can do. So again, constitutionally speaking, the 14th Amendment, we all talk about Section 1, that's the Due Process Clause, the Equal Protection Clause. Most litigation is there in Section 1. Section 5 of the 14th Amendment actually empowers Congress to enforce Sections 1 through 4 through legislative power. So translating that from legalese into reality, what that means is if you accept the argument that I said, that the Equal Protection Clause actually bans abortion, then under Section 5 of the 14th Amendment, Congress has direct constitutionally given power to directly legislate on that nationally. Congress could literally pass a statute tomorrow. Senator Hawley, Senator Cruz, some other pro-life leader could draft this legislation tomorrow. Basically, it's drafting a bill and saying that we are going to invoke our Section 5 14th Amendment power and interpret the Equal Protection Clause as this and ban abortion nationwide. So, we're talking about lobbying legislators, kind of getting that argument out there. That argument, I think, should only continue to get out there more. And the final thing that I'll add here that we also could do, and this is another idea that my friend Josh Craddock, who I mentioned, has kind of been at the forefront of pushing. I think this is totally right. There's this misguided notion, and I've written so many words kind of arguing against this, that the Supreme Court is kind of the final authority binding law of the land, that it binds the presidency, it binds the Congress, it binds the states. Total nonsense. The Supreme Court is obviously the least dangerous branch, to borrow Alexander Hamilton's words from Federal 78. Abraham Lincoln, from my perspective, the greatest president in United States history, of course, famously openly defied the Dred Scott decision. He issued passports to free blacks in Western territories in direct defiance of the Dred Scott decision here. Supreme Court opinions are only binding as to the parties to the lawsuit itself. So another thing that a pro-life president, obviously not the current one that we have, but a future pro-life president, President Trump could have done this if he, in theory, if he'd wanted to, but a future pro-life president could do this, could basically take executive unilateral action and again interpret the 14th Amendment along the lines that I have described and issue an executive order that would interpret persons as far as all federal rules and regulations are concerned to include unborn persons, and therefore under all kind of executive, administrative state rules and regulations, unborn persons would be protected under the rule of law everywhere where born persons are protected. So those are kind of the tools at the federal level in like that worst case scenario that I would envision.
So we have the tools. We need to vote the right people into office is what it sounds like. So if our other contestants, we're not on a game show. I wish we were. I'd give you all a free car. But if our other panelists here, our last thing for you, if you could give 30 seconds, what do you think everyone in this room, what is a concrete thing that everyone in this room can go do tonight to try to prepare the way for the unborn children who are in the womb right now, whose mothers may be contemplating abortion? What can we do to prepare a better place in America for those children?
Great question. I'll jump in here. I think right away, just realize that this is a fight, and we're not going to persuade everyone before we make abortion unthinkable and illegal in our nation. I think so many Christians that I encounter, we want everyone to agree with us, and then we'll all harmoniously come together around this. We can fight for that. We're going to try and persuade and educate. We know it changes hearts and minds, but just be ready to fight for the right thing. We didn't, to go back to what Josh was saying, we didn't wait to make slavery illegal until everyone thought it should be illegal, right? We didn't. And in fact, there was a crappy 3/5 compromise, which was no compromise at all, because a human being is a human being, right? So in the same way, I think of that with abortion law. We are compromising on 20 weeks pain capable. We are compromising on heartbeat or 15 weeks, right? Or at least just let us protect children with Down syndrome, okay? But our goal is to go get them all. Just like in the Bible, leave the 99, go back for the one. We want the 99, but we want them all. And so just be prepared to advocate. If you have questions, man, I really don't know how to answer a question about rape or this life of the mother exception. There's answers out there for you. I encourage you to check out Live Action's Pro-Life Replies, which is great little TED Talks. Josh Craddock is featured in there, who Josh just mentioned. There's so many ways for you to be more educated. I know there are things that I want to look up. I want to look up, when you said 1 billion babies, I'm like, all right, you know what? Someone's going to say that our planet couldn't handle 1 billion babies. So how do I respond to that? Be ready to have an answer for what you believe in. I already said, use your platform, your social media, your email list, your friends. Just be that place of love and acceptance, because you never know, guys, who in your arena may find themselves in unplanned pregnancy or know of someone who is. And lastly, I will say pray and act. Pray for the justices, pray for people's change of hearts. I often pray for our administration that they would have a Saul to Paul moment. Man, I want them to wake up and go, what are we doing? And stop a lot of the things that they're doing, but particularly on abortion, that they would understand that we all have unique human dignity. So that's what I'd say. Use your voice, pray, act, and I forget the last one, but that's you. Hopefully someone wrote it down.
This is pray for the stand.
Pray vote
Stand, that's
stand.
okay. And I'll make it real short. You know, our motto, Chloe and I, when we travel around, is embrace, don't erase Down syndrome. I encourage you to connect with us. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and that, because we do a lot of things. We speak all over. We're speaking in West Virginia on Saturday. So just spread the word. And I tell people all the time, you know, you can either follow the word or follow the world. It's a one-letter difference. The L will get you lost because it's all lies about life. So make sure you root yourself in the word. We read the word every day, because the word is where you're going to get your knowledge. It's where you're going to get your facts, and that's where you're going to get your courage. I've been in a lot of battles in life. This is the greatest mission God's ever placed me on, and I just hope you join us in this battle, because we will defeat the enemy. Thank you.
The only thing that I'll very briefly add here in our remaining seconds is I want to emphasize the vote in vote. All of this is kind of moot and academic unless everyone watching, unless all of our friends, our congregationists and everyone, unless we get out there and actually vote. The reality is that the current administration, it was literally just this week, if I'm not mistaken, that the administration returned Title X family planning funding to Planned Parenthood. You know, that's purported Catholic Joe Biden, right? The House of Representatives recently just is trying to quote unquote legislatively codify Roe versus Wade. Which would again effectively put under our U.S. federal statutory law a woman's quote unquote right to choose up until effectively the 9th month of pregnancy. The current ruling regime is radically unhinged on this issue. The days of Clinton era safe, legal, and rare are totally gone. That is anathema to the current leadership of the Democratic Party. And unless we get off our feet and get to the polls and vote to kick those bums out of office, all this is kind of moot and academic, I think.
Let's give a final round of applause for our panelists.
Great job, panel. One more hand for our amazing panel. Thank you, guys. Great job. I failed to mention that Mary Zock played for the basketball team at Notre Dame, as you might well imagine, and came very close to winning a national championship. All right, well, we're excited to move on and introduce you, for those of you who don't know, Vivek Ramaswamy. And he has written a book called Woke Incorporated, Inside Corporate America's Social Justice Scam. If you've been skeptical about the embrace of corporate America to causes like Black Lives Matter or some of the other movements that have caused you to question, you're going to really appreciate this next presentation. Let me tell you a little bit about our next guest. He's a best-selling author, successful entrepreneur who founded multiple very successful enterprises. A first-generation American, he's the founder and executive chairman of Roviant Sciences, a new type of biopharmaceutical company focused on the application of technology to drug development. In 2020, he emerged as a prominent commentator on stakeholder Capitalism, Free Speech, and Woke Culture. He has authored numerous articles and op-eds which have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, National Review, Newsweek, and Harvard Business Review. We do have some signed copies of this available for purchase. You can find these out in the foyer on your way out. I would encourage you to pick up your copy. But for now, we'd like to have you please welcome Vivek Ramaswamy.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'll kick off with a story I tell in the book. It's actually one of my favorite stories about Christ. I first learned it in high school, and it doesn't come from the Bible. It's a parable in Fyodor Dostoevsky's great novel, The Brothers Karamazov, in the chapter entitled The Grand Inquisitor. And in that chapter, he tells the story of Christ coming back to earth in the middle of the Spanish Inquisition, walking the streets of Seville. And the Grand Inquisitor of the church spots Christ on the street, and he has him arrested. He locks him up in a prison cell, and the climax of this chapter is the dialogue between the Grand Inquisitor and Christ himself. And in that dialogue, the Grand Inquisitor tells Christ, "We, the church, don't need you anymore. We already carry out the work that you once stood for, but your presence here impedes the work of the church from getting done." And that's why he sentences Christ to execution the next morning. For the next half hour, I'm going to tell you about a new church in America, a church that has sentenced to death America's own true essence. I'll take you back to 1993, when I was in second grade, growing up in Southwest Ohio. And that's when I heard Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech for the first time. That was the speech where he said, "I hope my 4 children grow up in a country where they are judged not on the color of their skin, but on the content of their character." And that dream stuck with me. It meant something to me because it was the dream that allowed me to go in a single generation from being the kid of Indian immigrants who came to this country with almost no money to becoming the founder of a multi-billion-dollar company. It was the dream that allowed me to achieve everything I ever had in my life. And I had served as CEO of that company for 7 years. We developed drugs for patients who needed them. One of the ones I'm most proud of is a new FDA-approved drug for prostate cancer. But I stepped down as CEO earlier this year to work on a different kind of cancer. Not a biological cancer, but a cultural cancer that threatened to kill that dream that Martin Luther King had 60 years ago. That threatened to kill the dream that allowed me to achieve what I have in my life. And that new cancer is what we call woke culture in the United States. In order to understand a cancer, you have to understand the roots of that cancer. And I look at the 2 most dangerous ideologies in the 20th century were Nazism, which was identity politics on steroids, and Marxism, which was an oppressor-oppressed narrative on steroids. Put the 2 together, you get their love child here on American soil. That is modern wokeism. It is a new secular religion in this country whose belief system centers on the idea that your identity is based on your race, your gender, and your sexual orientation, full stop. It says that America is a systemically racist country, that if you're black, you're inherently disadvantaged, that if you're white, you're inherently privileged. No matter your economic background, no matter your upbringing, your race and your gender govern who you are and the thoughts and ideas that you're allowed to have. And you don't have to take it from me. You could take it directly from the high priests of this new religion. Take Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, her words, not mine, a year ago, where she said that we don't want any more black faces that don't want to be a black voice. We don't want any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice. I'm going to guess that I don't fit her description of what counts as a brown voice. But there's a really clever part about how this particular virus spreads. And it's this: if your race goes from being about your skin color to being about your voice, then any disagreement with that voice actually becomes evidence of racism. And so today, if you say that I'm not racist, that actually means that you are racist. If you say that all lives matter, somehow that means that you believe that black lives don't matter. If you capitalize the W in white, or you fail to capitalize the B in black, as of the Associated Press's definition last year, you're also a racist. And there is no greater damnation in modern America than to be called a racist. So when given the choice between pledging allegiance to this new religion and being tarred with the scarlet R, everyday Americans are choosing to bend the knee. And that has created a new culture of fear in our country. Fear of losing your job, fear of your kids getting a bad grade in school, fear of becoming a pariah in your own community. And that culture of fear has completely replaced our culture of free speech in America. And if you ask me, the best measure of the health of any democracy is the percentage of people who are willing to say what they actually believe in public. And right now, we are doing abysmally on that metric. According to a recent survey by the Cato Institute, over 60% of Americans, I want you to process that number for a second, 60% of Americans say they're afraid of expressing their true beliefs because of the current political environment. That is not America. That is not the country that my parents came halfway across the world to join. That is not the country I learned to pledge allegiance to as a kid. That is not the country that I want to see America become. We have a new red guard in this country, except instead of pushing the philosophy of Chinese Marxism, they're now pushing this philosophy of wokeism, where in the name of diversity, we have completely sacrificed true diversity of thought. In the name of democracy, we have sacrificed our most important ideals of free speech and open debate. In the name of inclusion, we've created this new exclusionary culture where certain points of view just aren't welcome. Wokeism today is not about challenging the system. Wokeism is the system. And the story of how we got here is actually an untold story that dates back to the 2008 financial crisis. Because what happened after the 2008 crisis in this country was that in the eyes of the old left, big business was the bad guy. And what the old left wanted to do was to take money from those wealthy corporations and redistribute it to poor people for the benefit of poor people. But there was a newly ascendant progressive woke left at that time that had a different theory of the case. They said that the real problem in this country wasn't economic injustice or poverty. No, it was racial injustice and misogyny and bigotry. And that actually presented the opportunity of a generation for big business in this country to be able to go from being the bad guys to being the good guys if they just said the right things. Applaud diversity and inclusion. Put some token minorities on your boards. Muse about the racially disparate impact of climate change after you fly in a private jet to Davos. It was actually a pretty good life if you're in big business in this country. But the trade worked, where Goldman Sachs can go to Davos last year and say they're not going to take a company public in the United States if its board is insufficiently diverse, where Goldman Sachs is, of course, the sole arbiter of diversity, and they do not mean ideological or viewpoint-based diversity, I can assure you that. They can do that, but ultimately deflect accountability for the actual business practices that the old left wanted to go after them for. They were happy to lend their money and their legitimacy to this new woke movement, but they did not do it for free. They had a new ask, which was that the new left look the other way when it came to leaving their monopoly power intact. That trade worked so masterfully on Wall Street, where you had a bunch of big banks that got in bed with a bunch of woke millennials. Together they birthed woke capitalism. That's what allowed them to put Occupy Wall Street up for adoption. And then Silicon Valley copies the act. They say this is actually working out pretty well for Wall Street. We want to do the same thing. So they agree to censor, or in their language, moderate, any content on the internet that the new woke left did not want to see online. But again, they didn't do it for free. They expect that the new left look the other way when it came to leaving their monopoly power intact. You see, that's how this arranged marriage works. It is not a marriage of love. It is more like mutual prostitution, but it is working because each side gets something out of the trade, and the net result of that act was the illegitimate birth of what I call the woke industrial complex, a new Leviathan that is far more powerful than what Thomas Hobbes envisioned 400 years ago, far more powerful than what our own founding fathers envisioned 250 years ago, and now the rest of corporate America is getting in on the act too. Coca-Cola would rather teach their employees how to be less white or issue statements about a new voting law in Georgia than it would to be able to deal with its own product's impact on the nationwide epidemic of diabetes and obesity, including, by the way, in the black community that they profess to care so much about. It's the rest of corporate America, thank you, one after the other getting in on the act. Nike is I was just talking about it backstage with somebody backstage. I could give you 1,000 examples. Nike is one we were just talking about before this speech. Nike's a company that criticizes slavery 250 years ago without doing a peep or saying a peep about reducing its own reliance on slave labor today in Asia to source $250 sneakers that they sell to black kids in the inner city who can't afford to buy books for school. That is how this game is played. Now, there's an even more dark turn that this story takes in recent years, where a new party shows up on the scene. It's a new guest on the act who turns this unholy alliance into a three-party affair. And that's the Communist Party of China. And I will tell you that they understand this game far more deeply than any of us do. There is even a Chinese word for wokeness, baizuo. Literally refers to woke white people in the United States, and they use it to laugh at us. But even worse, they are now using it as a tool to advance their geopolitical agenda by creating a false moral equivalence between China and the United States. Listen really carefully to what they're saying. Xi Jinping, when he's now pressed on the Uyghur human rights crisis in the Xinjiang province, the first thing he says to the UN or to the EU is that Black Lives Matter shows that the United States is no better. His top diplomat came here earlier this year to the Alaska summit. And what he said was that China wants to see the U.S. stop slaughtering black Americans, and that China hopes the U.S. does better on human rights. Now, that would be laughable if it weren't for the fact that the newly woke corporations are lending implicit credibility to their claims. Take Disney. Just a couple of years ago says it cannot shoot a film in the state of Georgia if Georgia passes the equivalent of a new heartbeat bill, an anti-abortion statute. But last year, Disney goes to the Xinjiang province of China, where it shoots Mulan. Literally, this is ground zero of the Uyghur human rights crisis, where there are over 1 million Uyghurs enslaved in concentration camps, subject to forced sterilization, communist indoctrination, and worse, in some of the worst human rights abuses we've seen by a major nation since the Third Reich of Germany. And Disney shoots Mulan there, does not say a peep until the end of the film. You could see it in the credits today, where they thank the local CCP authorities for allowing them the privilege of filming there. The very authorities that have enslaved over 1 million people in their concentration camps. That is how this game is played. That's Disney. It's the NBA continuing to expand into the Chinese market, saying nothing even as it decries racial injustice here in the United States. It is LeBron James criticizing the general manager of the Houston Rockets for tweeting in favor of standing with Hong Kong. LeBron James is the first person that comes to China's public defense while denouncing American Daryl Morey for daring to stand with Hong Kong. That is how this game is played. Now, the reason why these corporations and their crony celebrities do it, you might ask, is actually very simple. It comes down to money. Because you see, what China has mastered is building a great Chinese wall to any company that dares to criticize the CCP, but they will roll out the red carpet to any company that criticizes the United States. So companies are doing what companies do. They have turned our own companies into Trojan horses to advance their agenda from within. We made a mistake in this country, dating back 30 years, where we thought we could use our money to get them to be more like us. Well, guess what? They have turned that game on its head, where they are now using their money to get us to be more like them. And it's even worse. It's not even their money. They are using our money to get us to be more like them. We thought we could send Big Macs and Happy Meals and somehow that would spread democracy abroad. And instead, they have sent back Disney movies and Nike sneakers as Trojan horses to spread their values from within. That is the game we are contending with, and they have been so successful at that game that they're now even using the same trick to be able to evade accountability for the origin of this pandemic, labeling any accusation that this virus originated in a lab in Wuhan, where the data increasingly points to, by calling or labeling that inquiry as racist. That is the game they are playing, and I am sorry to say China is winning, woke corporations are winning, LeBron James is winning, our celebrities are winning, our companies are winning. The real losers of this game are the American people and American democracy as we know it. So we've got a little over 15 minutes left. I'd like to transition to talking about the solutions. I think you all know the problem well. I don't need to tell you more about that. I lay it out more in my book. But I would like to talk about what a better way forward looks like, and it's going to require an awakening of the conservative movement in this country. I'll tell you first about one of my heroes, Ronald Reagan, who in 1980 did what he needed to do to tackle the problem of his era. He cut government regulations, he cut taxes, he ushered in an era of prosperity whose fruits we continue to enjoy to this day in this country. And that's why he's one of my heroes. But I will also remind you of my favorite Republican hero, Abraham Lincoln, who 160 years ago reminded us that the dogmas of a quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. And what I say is that the dogmas of 1980 are inadequate to address the unique challenges that we face today in the year 2021. We need new solutions that recognize that the threat to liberty and prosperity in this country is not just big government. That may have been the case in 1980. Today, it is only half the story. It is this new marriage between big government and big business that is far more powerful than either one alone because it can do what each cannot do on its own. Let's talk about the issue of big tech censorship at the top of that list. Today, what you see from big tech is an argument that says that we're private companies that are free to remove what we do or don't want to remove from our website. And according to even 1980-style conservative ways of thinking, that makes sense if you're actually operating as a private company. But today, we know that these companies are working hand in glove with the ascendant party in power in the United States to be able to carry out censorship online that the government could not carry out directly. The government in this country is now delegating its dirty work to the private sector to do through the back door what Congress could not do directly through the front door. And you know what I say? If it is state action in disguise, then the Constitution still applies. When these companies work hand in glove with the government, they ought to be bound by the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America. Now, these same companies then go to the offline world and are engaging in censorship in our culture by threatening to fire any employees that defect from that orthodoxy. There were numerous employees fired last year for wearing hats with the name of one of two presidential candidates, one of whom came from a major party in the United States. That isn't the American culture that I know. Now, what I say is that if you can't fire somebody at work today because of their race or their gender or their sexual orientation or their religion or their national origin, then you should not be able to fire them on account of their political beliefs either. We need to add political expression as a civil right and a protected class in the Civil Rights Act in 1964, right there next to race, gender, sexual orientation, and national origin and religion. Now, I have to admit, there's a libertarian side to my brain that says that the last thing we should want to do, I used to think this way myself, is to impose another restraint on private businesses that prevents them from making decisions for themselves. That the market should work this out. That if these great businesses over here have an opportunity to hire conservatives that are being fired by silly businesses over here, the market should be able to work that out. But here's the thing. We have to apply those standards evenly. And if you can't fire somebody because they're black or gay or Muslim or white or Christian or Jewish or whatever, then you should not be able to fire them just because they're an outspoken conservative either. And this is not an academic issue. It is happening indirectly or directly every day in this country. If it can happen to the 45th president of the United States, it can happen to anybody. So these are the kinds of policy solutions that I think the conservative movement needs to wake up to today. I lay out many more of those in my book, but even these legal solutions are really just a form of symptomatic therapy. What we really need in this country is a cultural cure. And I'm going to talk about a controversial subject that's near and dear to my heart that I want to see unfold in that cultural revival, is the revival of the unapologetic pursuit of excellence in this country. I'll ask you to reflect on Simone Biles, one of the top American gymnasts in U.S. history, goes to Tokyo to compete in the Olympics, pulls out in the middle of competition. Naomi Osaka, one of the top female tennis players in the world, does nearly the exact same thing just a couple of months earlier, and the media cheers at every step of the way. Is that entirely unrelated to Naomi Osaka's decision to give up her U.S. citizenship just 2 years earlier in 2019? Is it entirely unrelated to intersectionality as a theory of identity for how young black women are supposed to think about themselves in this country? I don't think so. And I don't think that trend is just limited to sports either. Second-generation Asian American kids are now afraid to outwardly pursue excellence in math and science because it's just not cool to be number one anymore. Standardized testing is ridiculed as racist. Talking about American exceptionalism is now considered gauche. I think that America's inner animal spirit, the animal at the heart of America, has been tamed. It has been domesticated by this new culture that penalizes excellence and rewards this new cult of mediocrity and victimhood. I think the pursuit of excellence and the pursuit of American exceptionalism are at the heart of what it means to be American, and the loss of those ideals leaves a deep moral and cultural vacuum in its wake. That's when dark forces begin to fill the void. When we hungered and rallied behind the cry to make America great again, we didn't just hunger for Donald Trump, we hungered for the unapologetic pursuit of excellence in our country itself. Now, I'll tell you how Dostoevsky ends that story of the Grand Inquisitor. Christ doesn't say a word as the Grand Inquisitor challenges him even as he is sentenced to death. But at the end of that story, Christ ends the act with a kiss on the Grand Inquisitor's cheek. And he's so shocked by that act, the Grand Inquisitor is, that Christ simply walks out the door and makes his way out into the horizon. That's how that story ends. That sets a very high example for us to abide by, but I will cause it to reflect on what our path forward as a country may look like as well. It's not just about the pursuit of excellence that matters, but the civic foundation against which we're able to pursue our excellence that matters too. I'm not a big fan of policies that nakedly try to redistribute wealth for its own sake, as you may have seen in the USSR. But I do think that we on the right are overdue for a discussion not about redistribution of wealth, but about a redistribution of duty, of our civic duty. I think we need to be weaving civic education and civic service into every stage of our educational process. I look at the National Guardsmen who lifted people up out of Louisiana out of the worst hurricane since Hurricane Katrina just a matter of weeks ago, and wonder what is so different about them from the rest of us that they were out there the next morning doing what needed to be done. I think we have a civic obligation today to bring back our Afghan allies from Afghanistan who stood for what this country ultimately stood for. We need to bring them back here and welcome them with open arms. But we need to bear those civic duties evenly. We can't just send them to Ohio and to Wisconsin. Let's send them to Beverly Hills. Let's send them to Martha's Vineyard. Let's send them to the Hamptons. Civic duties ought to be shared equally as Americans. And against that backdrop, we can tolerate inequitable outcomes if we begin not only under conditions of equal opportunity, but under conditions where our civic duties are carried out equally. And that begins in the next generation with educating our youth in our schools. Our schools are teaching our children to be ashamed of our history rather than to be proud of it. Patriotism is on the decline. Faith has nearly disappeared. What does it even mean to be American in the year 2021? I can't remember a time in my life where we more badly needed an answer to that question. Our lack of an answer to that question is the black hole at the center of our nation's soul. And when you have a vacuum that runs that deep, that is when the postmodern religion begins to fill the void. Wokeism is like opium for the American masses. It is opium for the American soul. But the right answer isn't to simply stamp out wokeism for its own sake. It is to fill that void with something far more rich and far more meaningful that dilutes the woke agenda to irrelevance. We have celebrated our diversity over the last 10 years. And make no mistake, our diversity as a country is a beautiful thing. But I think our diversity is meaningless without something that binds us together across that diversity, something greater, the ideals that we espouse together across our differences. Lacking that, I think our diversity is meaningless because we are then just another group of different looking higher mammals occupying a common geographic space, doing what our iPhones told us to do on a given day. That is not America. America wasn't even a place. It was a vision of what that place could be. It was an idea that brought together an otherwise divided polyglot group of people 250 years ago. And at the top of that list of ideals was the dream that I told you about at the very beginning. The American dream. The idea that no matter who you are, or where your parents came from, or what language they spoke, or what your skin color is, that you can achieve anything you ever want in this country with your own hard work, your own commitment, and your own dedication. And by the way, that you're free to speak your mind at every step of the way. America is not a country that forces you to choose between putting food on the dinner table and speaking your mind freely, between the American dream and the First Amendment. Together, that is the American dream as we know it. Now, the other side will say that that's actually just a load of high-minded drivel, because America has always been imperfect. We are a flawed nation since the day that we were founded, and we have never lived up to our ideals. Well, you know what I say? Somewhere deep down in there, they have a point. America wasn't perfect on the day that we were founded. America hasn't been perfect ever since the day we were founded. America will never be perfect because perfection is impossible on God's green earth. But more so than any nation in human history, America was born on the idea that perfection is impossible. That's why we have a system of checks and balances. Our hypocrisy is only made possible by the fact that we have ideals in the first place. But more so than any nation on earth, America was about the pursuit of perfection, the pursuit of a more perfect union, the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of liberty, equality, and justice for all. Those were the values that won the American Revolution. Those are the values that reunited us after the Civil War. Those are the values that won us World War I and World War II and the Cold War. Those are the values that still give hope to the free world. And if we can revive those common values over fractious group identity, then I say nobody in the world, not a nation, not a corporation, not a virus is going to defeat us. That is what true American exceptionalism is all about, and that is what we will need to revive in order to defeat this cultural epidemic. Thank you. God bless you. God bless your families. And God bless our country. Thank you.
I think we found our next candidate for President of the United States. Are you hearing that? Oh my, that was awesome. Well, it's going to get awesomer. So folks, we want to share with you before we introduce our next panel that you're going to love about Generation Joshua, another one of our wonderful exhibitors. Let's take a little closer look at who they are and what they do. All right, let's hear it for Generation Joshua. Another wonderful ministry that I hope gives you encouragement and hope as to what we have out there. There's just so many wonderful ministries like them that are making a difference in America. Well, we want to talk about the battle for America's classroom, something I know that all of us care very deeply about. So we've, again, put together a very impressive panel, and it will be moderated by Mr. J.P. Duffy, who serves as the Vice President for Communications at Family Research Council. Please welcome J.P. Duffy and our next panel.
Thank you, Gil. And yes, I'm excited about this panel. We were just talking backstage, and this is going to be awesome. And I can already tell you, they are heroes in my book. And we've heard from a lot of heroes, I think, over the last day. But this group in particular, I think, if what's happened this week, as what we've seen out of the Biden administration, I think underscores their hero status. When you think about it, why is the Department of Justice undertaking this intimidation campaign initiative that as it's being called? Why do you think it is? It's because of them. It's because of you. It's because of parents rising up all across this country and saying, enough is enough. We're taking back our kids from the clutches of indoctrination. We're going to stand up. And these have stood up. They have been through the fire. And believe it or not, they have a testimony of how they've overcome. And I'm excited to hear about how God has been faithful every step of the way. And parents are making the difference. And I think a message that I'm beginning to hear that is emerging to President Biden and the Attorney General of the United States that, hey, we're looking past this memo that you're waving around. We're looking to a higher authority. First, there's the U.S. Constitution of the United States that protects our free speech. That's one authority. But there's even a higher authority than that. It's God's Word. That is the ultimate authority that we look to. And as Tony Perkins has noted on a number of occasions, we can delegate the authority of who educates our children. We can do that. But we can never delegate the responsibility. God gives each one of us parents, I have school-age children, I know that ultimately the responsibility of the content that they're exposed to, what they learn, ultimately I will stand before God and answer for that. All of us will. As to what our kids, what they're learning, how their worldviews are being formed, as we heard earlier from George Barna. That's on us. And it's not even just parents, it's the educators, it's pastors, and all of whom are represented right here on this panel. And so with that in mind, that's why we brought this group together and to share their stories about what drew them to get involved. And I believe at the end of this that you will be inspired, you will be equipped to go back into your schools, your communities, and make a difference. So with that, I want to go ahead and introduce our panel. Carol Nice, right here in the middle. She lives here in neighboring Fairfax County. She is a wife and a mother of 6 children, and she's been regularly attending and speaking out at school board meetings for the last 6 years. So although I guess the Biden administration's already probably figured that out by now, but that's okay, And then next we have Keisha King. She is a spokesmom for Moms for Liberty, and she has just been doing amazing work equipping parents. So incredible what she's been doing. And then our next panelist, Jonathan Copel, right there at the end. Woo, yes. He was teaching Spanish in his Louisiana high school, and he decided to get up and address and speak out at his school board meeting concerning indoctrination in his school. So he's got a powerful story to tell. And then our final panelist here, Pastor Iverson Jackson. He's the senior pastor of Little Rock Zoe Bible Church. He's an activist, a delegate, chairman of the African American Coalition for the State GOP, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. So he is, if there's anybody that's qualified to speak to the impact of the critical race theory indoctrination, It's this guy. He, from every sector of society, he has seen it. So what an incredible, amen. So I think I just want to start, Carol, with you. You're kind of one of the more local ones here. This is kind of ground zero for what we've been seeing that is just spread all across the country as parents are speaking up and speaking out, and you've been doing that. So as a mom of 6 kids, obviously a very busy life, a lot going on, you could spend your time in a lot of different ways, and getting engaged and becoming an activist, that's hard work, right? I mean, so why? What drew you in to this?
Well, definitely. Originally what drew me in was when gender ideology in Fairfax County really started to be pushed. And like so many other people, I'm sure here, I have dear friends whose children have been sucked into it, and I've seen them suffer. And I knew that this is not something that we can teach kids, that this is really what's happening. You know, God doesn't make mistakes. Nobody's born in the right body. And trying to teach that is only going to lead to more suffering. And so I just had to get involved. And then in 2018, I don't know, maybe local people who read the Washington Post might remember a quote from David Aponte. He was at the time the vice president of a group called GLSEN, which is their main goal is to get, this is from their website, to organize around LGBTQ affirming public policy with a special focus on how to get it into schools. And Mr. Aponte said that Northern Virginia and California have served as laboratories for policies regarding this. I don't know, that enraged me. I did not want my children to be lab rats in an experiment that I didn't appreciate. So at the time, the main thing, this is going back to 2016, pretty much the only place that the gender ideology was being promoted in Fairfax County was through the family life education curriculum. It's something mandated by the state board of education, but each county has leeway of how they carry it out. Well, in Fairfax County, from grades K to 12, they teach this. They teach it every year. And in some cases, kids will have 11 or 12 lessons in a single year. It's way too much. It's way too much for the kids. It's way too much for the parents who want to try to see what's going on. So a group of concerned parents and grandparents, we kind of got together to take a deep dive and look at each lesson, and to, as a service to parents, because you didn't have time to look at all these lessons. And what we did was we tried to check ourselves, only look at the facts, not bring in our own personal things, but kind of code the lessons either green, these are okay. These are, some of them are even really good. Yellow, maybe take a closer look, maybe it's not age appropriate for your specific child, or red, opt out. So that's what we did. And we kind of were able to get it around. And anyway, so some of the lessons are fine. The bad ones are the gender ideology, when you're taught that sex is assigned at birth rather than what we can all observe. There were lessons that talked about prophylactic drugs that should be given to children to avoid sexual diseases. I mean, things that were just clearly red flag. And so in the years since I've been following these issues in schools, things have kind of gone from bad to worse. The gentleman I spoke about, Mr. Aponte, he has actually been nominated by my school board member to sit on the committee that drafts family life education for Fairfax County. The teaching of gender ideology has spread from family life education to almost every other curriculum, and parents are shut out, concerns are ignored, people like me are considered a domestic terrorist. Yeah. I don't know. The FBI is on our heels. Parents are just shut out, and it's wonderful to be in a place where we can figure out how to marshal our forces and have our voices be heard.
Thank you. Keisha, I wanted to come to you next. You're in Florida, and so we know that the critical race indoctrination that we're seeing across the country, you've encountered it directly there. And so I'd just like to first start off, just have you share a little about what it is and just why it is so damaging to our young people.
So, just a little background.
First the background first. Yes, please.
So right after the 2016 election, I started to pay more attention to politics, and God spoke to my heart and told me that my skin color had become an idol in my life. And that was life-changing because it was so true. I saw everything through being black, and that was an offense to God. And I had to examine everything that I was doing. And so even the way I voted. And so I thought I had stumbled across something revelatory, which I did. And I was going to tell my family, and they were just going to, sing my praises. Well, I took it back to my family, and they were like, oh my gosh, she's drunk the Kool-Aid. And so, if you ever get to know me, when you tell me not to do something, that's just energy for me to go do it. So I really got involved, and I started, just really paying attention to what was going on. And I started learning about critical race theory through Vodi Bakum, actually. And when my daughter was asked what pronouns she wanted to be identified by in 8th grade at their first week of school, I'm like, what is going on? This is crazy. And so I told her, I was like, okay, just pay attention. I emailed the teacher. She never emailed me back. I was like, well, just pay attention to what's going on. So she recorded a conversation in class that the teacher they were supposed to be discussing books. And the books apparently had some racial themes in them. Well, she never got to the literature of the books or the academic portion. She just started sectioning the kids in the way that she talked to them by their physical characteristics. Oh, I'm sorry, as an African-American child, how do you feel about this? Oh, and as an Asian child, how do you feel about that? So on and so on. And we had a Board of Education meeting in Florida to ban critical race theory, and I spoke up against it because I knew it was happening, and they were trying to tell us that this was not in schools. And I'm like, no, it is. I've heard it. It's there. And so critical race theory, one of the first tenets is the idea that America is intrinsically racist. There is nothing you can do to remove the racism. There is no repentance for white folks. Apparently, only white people can commit the sin of racism, according to these people. I don't know where they get that from. But it is, everything about it is anti-biblical. It is anti-American, and it's just a flat-out lie. It's just not true. You cannot have a country that has been moving towards racial reconciliation literally from its beginnings, if you really, really dig into the history, and say that America is intrinsically racist. Those two things just don't go together. And one of the other tenets is the idea that any righteous act that white folks do is just to uplift white supremacy. So if you stand together, if you put your life on the line, back in the day as a white person, they would say, oh, you're just doing that to uplift white supremacy and racism. So you are willing to die to uplift white supremacy. It just doesn't make any sense. Those are just a few of the tenets of critical race theory that I think are really, really explains a lot of it. There are others, but those are the two.
Yes. Well, thank you for your stand. Thank you. All right, and then our next panelist, Jonathan, as I mentioned, spoke courageously before his school board in Louisiana. And before I asked him what led to him making the decision to speak out, I want you to see just a clip of what he had to say. Go ahead.
A man cannot menstruate. A man cannot lactate and breastfeed a child. You cannot give birth if you're a man. If you want to be an adult and do whatever you want with your life, I'm okay with that. Don't push this ideology on children. I'm not going to work in a district that's okay with that. This isn't a political indoctrination camp, okay? It's public education. We want to teach education, not left-wing ideas that aren't backed up by facts or science. Thank you.
Wow. you. Wow. So did you have any idea that what you were about to step into when you gave that speech?
I had like a little idea. I said, this could be big, but for the most part, I just kind of wanted to tell my school board how I felt. I wanted to tell parents in my area what was going on. But I did not think, I think it was a couple weeks later that particular video got like 10 million views in less than 48 hours on TikTok, got banned. It was called hate speech. And then it was on, I mean, the stuff that's happening today, it's like straight out of a comedy movie that you would have thought would have happened in the past. And this would have all been fake, but it's happening. So I had no clue, man.
Wow. Well, what kind of drew you to give this speech? Like, what precipitated?
So I was a teacher. I kind of was fresh to the profession. This would have been my third, I think it was my third year or fourth. It was third or fourth. But third, I'm pretty sure it was my third year. I would have been a third-year teacher, okay. And I'm hearing kids in my class, and they're starting to talk about things like, man, I didn't know how racist white people were. I'm so glad we had that conversation in English class. And I'm at my desk like, I cannot believe what I just heard. And I'm letting the kid be because they're working on a project, and I don't get involved with the kids' conversations. Unless it gets like bad, then I'm going to shut it down or send them to the office or whatever, call the parents. But I'm hearing this, and this little girl, she goes, oh, man, yeah, I didn't realize how racist I was as a white person. I'm thinking, what do you guys literally are friends, like y'all growing up in the same community. Where are you getting this from? And that's going on in my head. And then, I didn't do anything at that moment. Some kids come to me in between class, after class, and they say, Mr. Coble, man, this teacher's doing this, talking about communism. I'm going, wait a minute, this is not California. This isn't. I said, this is not California. This isn't Loudoun County. We're in. I said, we're in southeast Louisiana. I mean, everybody's hunts and fishes. In Louisiana, we've got Duck Dynasty. We've got it all. So I said, this is it. A friend of mine sends me a video. She's here today, Lilith. She's also a teacher from Fairfax. And she sends me a video of a program called Brain Pop. And I said, we use Brain Pop. The kids in my area in St. Tammany Parish use it. And so I said, you know what? I'm sick of it. I'm going to go say something. Nobody else is doing it. Maybe nobody knows. And that's how it started.
Wow. Yeah. That's incredible. What an amazing story. Yeah. And so now I want to bring in Pastor Jackson. You're a pastor, Little Rock, Arkansas, conservative state, right? And
most of the time.
What's that?
Most of the time.
Most of the time, yeah. So, and of course, pastor, we separation of church and state, but yet you're a pastor, right? You've heard of that, but yet you're a pastor and you got right involved. What drew you as a pastor to get involved and speak out in your community on these issues? Tell us kind of your story of how it all came about.
Yeah, that whole separation of church and state thing, I've heard it over and over, I've just never seen it, so. A guy owes me a steak dinner because, he bet me that it was in the Constitution.
Oh.
He still hasn't produced it. So, but when you say, how did I get involved? I got involved by doing what I do all the time. That's pastoring, preaching. So I preached a message in 2012 called, Where Does God Stand on the Issues? I took the 4 major issues of that day, that election, put them on that side, for the 2 parties. And I just said, this is what the Bible says. And so, different people heard the message and they thought it was a political message. And I was like, I don't, I really didn't even know how the parties worked that well. I knew how I voted, but I wasn't involved with it. And so, different groups would ask me to come and speak, but that's something that I always just teach anyway, because it's just part of the truth. It doesn't matter what this group says or what that group says, it's what does God say about it?
Amen.
And that's the only answer. So that applies in every area. All the 3 things that they've been talking about, I really don't give a rip what someone else says. Y'all not used to pastors talking like that? But I mean, I really don't. What matters is the truth, because that's the only way we can be free. And so when you bring in this doctrine that says that the only thing that really matters is your skin color, and I ask this question, I speak all around the state quite a bit in Arkansas on critical race theory, and I ask this question, I'll ask the same question to this audience today. When did you know you were whatever you are? When did you figure out you were white? When did you realize, come to the consciousness that you were black or whatever, wherever you fit, whatever you call it? When did you really realize that? And when most people hear that and they are thinking, well, and you get, when somebody told me. When somebody told me. And that's exactly right, because little children don't walk around thinking, I'm white, I'm black, I'm Asian. They don't. They just, when you have this teaching that white people are oppressors, black people are victims. And so I said, well, what if you have a couple, one is white and one's black, and they have a child? Does the child come home and say, mommy, you're an oppressor, or daddy, you're an oppressor, and mommy, you're a victim? How does that work? And so it's incumbent upon us as the church, as pastors, to preach the truth. You don't have to put a political sign in your churchyard. You just preach the truth, because that's the only way this nation will be healed. And you talk to your children, you tell them the truth, and you stick with that. So that's what I do when I go around the state speaking. And I had an opportunity. I was called by one of the legislators to speak last year when this thing was first happening with 1619 Project, and we talked about that. Now, here's the thing. There were 14 people that testified, 11 against it, and 3 for it. Well, 2 for it, and 1 didn't know what he was doing. So, but anyway, the only 2 people that actually read it, it's 100 pages, the only 2 people that actually read it were the 2 people that were against it. That was myself and another young lady. No one else read it, but they were up there testifying, saying, this is what this said. Oh, it's just history. No, it's not. If it's history, it's historical heresy. But it's not history. America was not founded in 1619. And the slaves on that ship were not the founding fathers. And so when you take something as obvious as that is just a flat out lie. It's not even, you don't even have to theorize it. It's just a lie. And so pastors, when people say, what's wrong with America? I say the pulpits. The pulpits. And that's what the problem is. So if we just preach the truth, well, people leave. Friends, people are going to leave anyway. Some of them will just die off. But they're going to leave. Nobody gets a ticket to stay. You're going to come and you're going to go. And then eternity is a long time to be at odds with God. So you preach the truth, and I look at it and say, how am I a victim? Several degrees, retired as a lieutenant colonel. I know a lot of people that look like me that are very, very, very successful. So if America is so racist, how are we doing so well? Now the good thing is there's nobody more influential in your child's life than the parent. All my children are adults now, unlike the rest of the panel. But my children are grown. But when they were in high school, I asked the 2 oldest girls, I guess this was 2007, 8. I said, what do you guys think about all this race thing? And they looked at me like I had a thumb growing out of my forehead. It's like, Daddy, we don't even think like that. And so that really blessed my heart to know that, because, their friends, all their friends just came, stayed the night, whatever, and asked if we would adopt them. But, and it didn't matter what we looked like. So that's the thing. The church has to stay with the truth. Pastors have to preach the truth. And whatever the consequences are, come on, folks, think about it. Persecution, what's persecution? I mean, nobody's being skinned, thrown to the lions, all that kind of stuff. We missed all that. Persecution is somebody don't like you, they call you a racist or an Uncle Tom. When they call me an Uncle Tom, I shake their hand and say, I appreciate that. Boy, he was a heck of a man.
Wow.
And he was. Because you just prove how ignorant they are. You say, you know who Uncle Tom was, right? And then they go, because they think as soon as you say Uncle Tom, that you're back down. Or just like, for you white folks, they call you racist, and then you go run and get in the shell. You say, well, thank you. Just tell them thank you. Just say, I appreciate that. And then they want, you want to be known as a racist? I said, no, you want to be known as ignorant?
Whoa.
I mean, you know, for those of you, I know the Bible says let the ignorant be ignorant still, but I'll help you out a little bit. The fictional character, Uncle Tom, was patterned after Josiah Henson, who was a slave. But he was a slave who escaped, went 600 miles into Canada, across 2 states, went into Canada, started a community there which still exists to this day. So he was one heck of a man.
Wow.
And so I appreciate being called Uncle Tom.
There you go. That's great. Well, Carol, I want to come back to you and to pick up on something you mentioned and how you served as a bridge between parents and the church, and how you brought the church into getting involved. And I just want you to kind of walk us through some of the steps, because I think that's powerful when the body of Christ rises up, when we, as Scripture says, there are many parts, many members of the body, and when we all work together, God moves in a mighty way. And we've seen how that's happened. So share a little more about that, if you would.
Well, the little group that I mentioned, we put together a chart with the red, yellow, and green. We had this really specific thing, and we took it to, I'm Catholic, we took it to our family life office there, and they were like, wow, this could be helpful. And so we took them, and I think they appreciated the fact that we took them a specific thing. As a pastor, you've got so many things going on, and people come to you with problems all the time. But we came with a problem, but also maybe with a way that could help other parents understand what was going on. And our family life office was very generous and had these printed, gave them out to our local parishes. Our bishop saw that the parents and kids in public schools really needed support. So he encouraged the priests in the diocese to talk about it from the pulpit. And it was great. I mean, it's going on, but I think it's a really good partnership. Parents have that, frontline view of what's going on in your kids' classrooms, So if you have the time and the inclination, I would encourage you to dig deep, to go to the school board meetings, to look at the lessons, the entire lessons, not just the summaries, to look at what books are being assigned to your kids, to look at what books are in your library, and to let your faith community leaders know. And maybe we can work together. Churches can also help. I know my bishop recently wrote a book, a teaching document, very thoughtful on the human person and gender ideology. If other faith communities could do things like that, I think it helps the kids to know that they're not standing alone. Things are being thrown at them from every which way, but if they know, wait a minute, it's not just my opinion. As Pastor said, it's truth. I'm standing on truth, and I have my family to support me, and I have my faith community to support me. It will just help them be able to stand up so much more. Youth groups, youth pastors could do events with the kids and with the parents to let them know, hey, you're not alone. Give them what they need to stand up to these things. Let them know that, that you're just not alone. There's one particular person I know who set aside some funds from his, giving at his church to help parents who desperately want to pull their kids from public schools, but, honestly don't have the means. So there are just so many ways that I think parents on the front line who can really dig deep and see what's going on, and maybe come up with some ideas that, hey, we know ways that you could maybe support not only my child, but all these other children. Go to your faith leader and your parish or whatever, because they want to stand with you. We're all on the side of truth, and if we work together, parents' voices can be amplified, and maybe we won't just be kicked under the table all the time like we don't care about it. We're not, we need to all stand together.
Thank you. Thank you for serving in that role. I mean, that's so critical. We have to see that. So, Keisha, coming back to you, how just pervasive do you think the problem of indoctrination is across the country? And what do you see, and what are some practical things that you think that parents can do, just in a very real way that you've seen that, how can they get involved? What advice would you have to offer?
It is extremely pervasive. I don't think parents realize just how pervasive it is. I know in Duval County, I found critical race theory workshops and events as far back as 2011. And I'm sure there are other things before that, because obviously it had to be something before that for it to even be a workshop. So I think understanding that they are not kidding. This is not going away. The enemy has no chill and is advancing forward as fast. We can see it. I mean, you're at home trying to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for your kids, and the FBI could be knocking at your door because you might have said the wrong thing at a school board meeting. These people, they are serious. They want to silence us and shut us down. I really think at this point, the only thing to do is have a mass exodus from the public school system. That's it. God bless you. Wow, thank you. Let's do it. I mean, I was talking to my Moms for Liberty group this morning, and with this FBI thing, it just made me realize, what else are we supposed to do? Standing up to these people doesn't seem to matter. I mean, we have, all of us, we've been at these school board meetings, we've been voicing our opinions, we're writing articles, we're emailing teachers, we're doing all that stuff, and they don't care. So I'm like, the only thing left to do is to just peace out. And I think that will really send the message when they can't take the money for our child being in their school. And I mean, I am willing to, I think what we need to do, it has to be us all doing it together. So maybe after we can get together and figure out how we, do it all at one time, so it really sends the message. You do not have the right to indoctrinate our children. They are our children. They were given to us by God, and you do not have the right to teach this nonsense. It is infuriating that they think that they do have the right to take our tax-paying dollars from our children and then teach them garbage. I mean, they don't even bother to teach math, reading, science, language arts. They're like, we don't need to do that. Let's just give them critical race theory and teach them how to organize and be little mini Marxists and activists. Like, no, thank you. We don't want that. So that's all I got. I feel like that's the only thing left to do, honestly, is just a mass exodus. We just got to pull them out. I know it's hard. It's going to be tough, but if we're not going to, two things that I believe each and every one of us will put our life on the line for: our faith and our children. This is that moment. This is happening right before our eyes. Michelle Bachman said it last night. This is the time. This is the revelation period, y'all. This is it. It's happening. This is not a show. And so I want to go down as, standing up for what I believe in, period. And I'm willing to put my life on the line for it. So. Yeah.
And we're seeing evidence of what you're talking about. The exodus, homeschooling is more than doubled just since the pandemic started, and so it's incredible to see what's happening there. So coming back to you, Jonathan. So There are those teachers, those Christian teachers who are still in the public school system. They've not left. Maybe a lot of the Christian kids have been pulled out. But what would you say, though, to those who are just like you, in your shoes, now that you've been through the fire, and they're watching this and they're saying, I'm seeing this coming into my school district. Should I speak out? What can I do? What advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, they need to know I got fired. So that's a real, I mean, it's just, look, it's a reality that could happen. You got the guy coming on the next panel, he got fired, then I think reinstated. So you have to, when you decide to speak out, you have to say, one, am I willing to do what nobody else is willing to do? And am I okay with losing my job? Okay, you have to accept that. You have to count the cost. Are you willing to make a sacrifice for those around you? Because that's, at the end of the day, that's what it is. And if you are a Christian and you have a problem with being a living sacrifice, you need to reassess yourself. You need to reassess. And, you know, the Bible, how many of you did God give you a spirit of fear? Okay, so we know, did God give us a spirit of fear? No. So you cannot be moved by fear, okay? We got the victory. I know what's going to happen at the end. I think somebody said it last night. We read the last book. We win, right? We win. So accept you have a calling on your life, okay? We're all called. We are strategically placed where we're at for a purpose. I didn't know why I was in teaching. I was like, you know, this is what I'm doing. This is my life. This is where I'm at. And I just got to the point where I was content. I said, you know, God, you've got me here for a reason, and there's a purpose in it. Little did I know what that purpose was. And you know, I'm seeing that now, and it's just amazing. I would say, speak out. Don't even think twice about it. You do only live once, and then when we die, we go to heaven. So let's have some fun while we're here on earth.
So just a question for whoever wants to jump on this. If there's just one tip or advice you would want to, like the most important tip you would give to a parent who's like, okay, I've heard this, I'm ready to get off the sidelines. I'm going to take whatever action, either it's going to the school board, maybe it's deciding to homeschool if they've fought the fight and they feel like at least they're going to keep the fight, but in the meantime, they're going to protect their children. If they're coming at, what would you say is just most important? Right ahead.
I think to make sure your child knows the truth. To make sure, because you can pull them out of school, but they're still going to go to McDonald's and hear things. You can homeschool them, but one day they're going to leave. So I think the most important thing is to just let your child, make sure, not let them, make sure they know the truth of humanity. That our faith is an incarnate faith, so our bodies matter. You know, God didn't just send down a spirit, he sent down his son as a human. And male and female, he created them. They're not going to hear that from anybody else. So make sure your child knows that. Give them the confidence to speak up. Let them know to pray. And let them know that they're not alone.
Amen. You know, you just mentioned prayer. And I think that's a good place to where we could leave this conversation. Pastor, would you pray? I think there are people who are watching right now. They're beginning to pray and ask God, what is it you want me to do? God's moving on hearts because they're out of love for their children, for their families, for their community, and they want to speak the truth. They want to speak it in love, and they want to. And so, would you just pray for that?
Yep. Let's pray. Father, we just thank you again today, Lord, as we come before you, and we just lift up this audience, those that are near, those that are far, those that will see this even later. Lord, and everybody's sitting around saying, so many are sitting around saying, what can I do? What can I do? Well, first and foremost, Father, to go before you and to ask the question, Lord, what would you have me to do? And we'll get up from there, Lord, knowing in our hearts that there is a path that you have set for us. And so open the eyes of our understanding that our hearts will be enlightened, that we would know what is the hope of our calling, that there is a place that you have for us to be. There is an action. We'll see it. We'll see it, and we'll know that that's what you have for us. for us to do. So, Father, I just pray for clarity of heart and mind, and more than anything else, Lord, for courage of convictions. Jesus, even when his disciples, most of them walked away and left him, he stayed on that path. And so we must stay on this path of truth and courage, because we know that the victory is ours. And Father, this is the hour that you have called us to be in, and we'll not fail you in this hour. So we just thank you, Lord, and we just again pray for the strength of all those that are watching to know that they are not alone, that there is a remnant that's with them. And so we give you the praise and the glory for it all, and we march on to victory in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. God bless you. That was powerful. Thank you. All right. Thank you. All right.
All right, folks, now we've got one last panel, and then you know what happens after that, right? My announcements. Then dinner. And I know no one's going to leave. All right, we're going to let you do this. Now, you can't go anywhere. I won't do it unless you promise you won't go anywhere. You promise? Because I'm going to let you stand. So everyone just stand to your feet right now. Don't move. Just get up and stand. Don't leave. Now, I want you to take your arms and hold them above your head as high as you can. Stretch, stretch, stretch. Now, stay in that position. Don't move. No, stay in that position. And now I'd like to ask our ushers to come forward for the offering. All right. Now that's better. Okay, everybody, sit down and shut up. No more Mr. Nice Guy. All right, now batting cleanup, our final panel before we have our 2-hour break right after my announcements. Before we get to that, I want to share with you another video about a wonderful ministry, the Patrick Henry College, another great, outstanding organization. Yes, let's learn more about Patrick Henry College.
If our nation is defined by our culture and our leadership, and is shaped by the way we educate our people, is there a chance we can preserve America for future generations?
It's always seemed to me that it will be the next generation who will really reclaim our land for the principles of godly morality, self-government, and constitutional liberty.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
You know, we're in urgent need of principal leadership, and Patrick Henry College was specifically designed to train those kinds of leaders. That's why PHC is one of the best strategies I know for preserving America for future generations. What makes PHC different from any other college in the nation is our commitment to 3 distinctives: high academic rigor, fidelity to the spirit of American founding, and most importantly, an unwavering biblical worldview. It's time for us to take a stand and change the course of our nation to be counted among the vigilant, the active, and the brave.
Let's hear it for Patrick Henry College. All right, and last this afternoon, we'll hear about Power to the Parents, Virginia's Education Uprising. Again, we've got a great panel put together led by our moderator, Meg Kilgannon, who is the Senior Fellow for Education Studies at Family Research Council. She previously served at the U.S. Department of Education as Director of the Office of Faith and Opportunity Initiatives in the Trump administration. Please welcome Meg Kilgannon and her panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's been a great day, and we heard about some parent fighters, and we're about to hear from some teachers who have stood up for truth. So on the panel today, I'm just going to let them introduce themselves. I don't want to do a lot of talking because we really want to hear from our wonderful panelists. So starting with Ian here, just tell us a little bit about where you're from and how you got to this point.
My name's Ian Pryor. I'm from here in Loudoun County. I'm the executive director of a group called Fight for Schools. Never thought, thank you. Never thought I'd be here. This has been really a journey of a year in getting involved and seeing what's happening in our schools and seeing how our school board officials conduct themselves. And, really, we've just put together an amazing group of parents that are going to push back and are going to fight on behalf of their kids for a premier education. And honestly, this is the proudest experience of my life.
Great. Tanner?
Hi, folks. Thanks for coming out. My name's Tanner Cross. I agree with Ian that Sorry if I get a little emotional. My folks are here, so they just celebrated 47 years, by the way, last week. So.
Yay! Congratulations.
Would not be here without the strong foundations of Christ that my parents instilled in me, and I'm so thankful for them. Again, I'm Tanner Cross. I teach Leesburg Elementary. It's an honor and a privilege to not only serve God, but serve this community. And we're going to fight the whole way and see it through and fight the good fight. So thanks for coming.
Monica?
Hi, I am Monica Gill. I am a teacher at Loudoun County High School right here in Leesburg. I've been teaching for 27 years, and I teach U.S. history and AP government. And I, like Ian, never thought that I would be in the position that I'm in right now, but the Lord puts opportunities in front of us, and when this all started a couple of years ago, really, I just said to him, I will be obedient to whatever door you open for me and whatever opportunity you give me, and so here we are.
I'm Tyson Langhofer. I'm senior counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom, and I'm the director of the Center for Academic Freedom, and I have the privilege and honor of representing Kim and Tanner and Monica in their lawsuit against Loudoun County Schools.
And Kim has just come in from the classroom, so we were just introducing ourselves. Kim, can you tell us about yourself?
Yes, right off the school bus. I'm Kim Wright, and I teach at Smartsmill Middle School, and I've been there for over 20 years teaching English, communications, computer applications, and I've taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Right now it's 6th grade, so I'm glad to be here tonight. Thank you.
Well, I think that we have a clip of that amazing speech Tanner made at the school board. I know I can't ever get enough of that, watching that clip. So if we have that to run, I think we should just run it to get us in the mood.
All of my students, but I will never lie to them regardless of the consequences. I'm a teacher, but I serve God first, and I will not affirm that a biological boy can be a girl and vice versa, because it's against my religion, it's lying to a child, it's abuse to a child, and it's sinning against our God.
So Tanner, knowing everything that's happened since that fateful night at the school board meeting, would you do it all over again the same way?
I would do it over again. I would do it 1,000 times over again.
Tell us your story. What prompted you to speak out that night?
Well, I learned that our school board was going to vote on 2 proposed policies that were going to be very harmful to teachers and harmful to students as well, because it was going to force teachers and students to affirm that biological boys could be girls and vice versa. And we just can't do that. We believe in the Bible. We believe in God's word, that he made male and female in his image, and we would be lying to children if we went along with these policies. So I learned that they were going to vote on this policy, and I just had a sense of urgency, like, hey, I have to go represent God. I have to stand on God's word and speak truth to a world that needs to hear it. So.
Great. And Monica and Kim, you joined in. What prompted you to join in the lawsuit?
I'll take that one. I had the same similar feelings as Tanner. We got wind of, my family and I, of the policy, and at some point I realized, wow, they might really pass this, and they're not listening to parents and teachers and the feedback that was coming down. And I had a long talk with my husband. We had conversations because of the changes in the school over the years, but this was a hard conversation, and this was a particular policy that would cause me to, I felt, do the opposite of what I've always wanted to do, and that is protect the kids that I've cared for, through the years, hundreds of kids, and I'm there to protect them. And this was compelling me to lie to them and say things that aren't true, and affirm something that, that a male is a female and vice versa, and it's just not true, and I felt like my integrity was on the line. And I had no problem stepping up and saying, we need to take care of this, and my family was supportive. And I also wanted to make sure that I spoke up for all the other people that weren't being heard, the parents and the community and my coworkers, some of the teachers from Loudoun, not necessarily my school in particular, but any school. And just, it was an easy decision to make.
Monica?
I think for me, the big issue was just watching the school board over the last couple of years really adopt policies that are ideological and not educational. And policy 8040 is to an extreme. It is a radical gender ideology policy that they are pushing. And as a teacher looking at this policy, it really completely defies the importance of language and the fact that words have meaning. Words convey meaning. So if a teacher or a student is forced to refer to another student by a pronoun that is not in alignment with their biological sex, we are conveying to that student that gender is fluid, and that is not true. That's not in alignment with science, that's not in alignment with reality, and it's certainly not in alignment with their inner biology. And as a teacher who has had many transgender students over the years, I have watched, and what I'm really seeing with these kids is they're in rebellion, and they're not just in rebellion against the pronoun that has been assigned to them. They are in rebellion against the word that is written inside them. We all have a word written inside of us, and the abbreviated version of that word is either XX or XY. But if you unravel that abbreviation, you get the human DNA strand, which scientists tell us is over 3 billion letters long. How can we then, as human beings, look at that word, the longest word known to humanity, and say, there's no author behind it? There's no precise meaning behind that. There is a way that I can just define for myself what that word means. And seeing these transgender kids in rebellion against that, they say things like, well, I'm just trying to be my true and authentic self. And my question to them is always, is that really what's going on? Are you really trying to be your true and authentic self, or are you in rebellion against your true and authentic self? And this policy 8040 is complicit in their rebellion. And it is, something that this gender dysphoria is in debate about what the best way is to care for students who are suffering from it, for kids who are suffering from it. But our school board has taken one side in that debate, and they have mandated it for everyone, students, teachers, and parents across the board, forcing us to be complicit in it, and forcing us to be complicit in saying things that we don't believe, that are also completely not true. and potentially more harmful for these kids in the long run. So for me, that was one of many reasons why I decided to join the case, and I'm so thankful to be here.
Great. So I want to get to the state of the lawsuit and to the state of some of the local politics in just a minute, but while we're sort of focused on the teachers, I'd really like to know from each of you, why did you go into teaching as your profession? Tanner, maybe you could go first.
Like I said, my folks are here, my dad's here, so if I get emotional, I'm a little apologetic for that. But what drove me into teaching was that I had a good father and I had a good mother, and like I said, they instilled the foundations of Christ in me. But I had this unique ability, or let's just say that I was blessed, that I got to see my father wear two hats, and he was our head football coach, weightlifting coach, and English teacher. So he was like a real Renaissance man to me, and I got to see, like I said, like he wore those two hats, and I got to see him how he served community, how he served with integrity with his football team, and how he treated everybody fairly. It doesn't matter what position you were in the school building. Figureheads in the community would come and talk to him every once in a while. And I was just so blessed that I got to see, I got to learn how to treat people. And trying to tie all this in is I just, I love, people. I love kids. I love students. I was very blessed, not only with my father and my mother, but I was also blessed with other men that poured seeds into me when I wasn't a Christian. And I was very thankful that they did that because, and I don't know them anymore, but I'm very blessed that seeds were planted into me, and now things make sense. And I just want to do the same thing, and that's what's encouraged me to be a teacher, and I want to do that with my kids. Now, obviously, I don't sit there and I don't preach Jesus to my kids, and as much as you want to, you can't do that because we have confines, and we want to respect that. We wouldn't want somebody of another faith, preaching to our kids about something else. But that's why I became a teacher, just to, not only just live for Jesus, but I just like the relationships. I like seeing kids grow. It's very gratifying to me. So.
Great, thank you. Kim?
As far back as I can remember, I wanted to teach school. I was thinking originally, my mother is an art teacher, for starters, and I used to go into her classroom. But even before that, when I would go babysitting, I had to be like the coolest babysitter around. I would pack things to do for the kids, and I guess it's kind of a small version of playing school with them. And I just enjoyed the interactions, and I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. I tried to be an art teacher for a while, but that didn't work out, and I realized I could use my creative endeavors in other ways and other subjects, and fell in love with English, teaching that subject. And while I was student teaching, I also fell in love with middle schoolers, and I know some of you are thinking, middle school? They're so much fun, and it's never boring, and I absolutely love that about my job.
Monica?
Well, I was that kid who always loved school and always loved all their teachers, and like Kim, I actually played school often. My mom can vouch for the fact that I made my brothers sit down and actually do work, and I would grade it, which is why I think they didn't like school. But I just always loved school and loved teaching. And then when I was in middle school, I was inspired by one of my social studies teachers, and she just lit a fire in me for loving history. And from there, she encouraged me, actually my senior year of high school, to do an internship where for a semester I actually student taught with her, which is a very unique opportunity. And she wrote my college recommendation to get me off into the education program at University of Maryland. And from there on, I always knew that I wanted to be a teacher, and I love history, and I love kids so much. I've dedicated my entire life to young adults, not just in teaching, but youth leadership at churches. And my husband and I ran a summer camp for high school kids for a number of years, taking them camping across the country and teaching them to be good leaders. So my heart is just really in the relationships with these young kids.
Beautiful. I wonder, staying with the teachers, how have you been received by your colleagues following your stance? What's been their reaction to your position, and how has that played out in the workday? Tanner?
There's actually been a lot of support, believe it or not. There's just been some little backlash here and there, and I think at the end of the day, you would be very surprised that believers and unbelievers have come to me and they have expressed how they support me. And I think at the end of the day, in America, we believe that we can speak freely at a public forum, where you're invited to speak. And I'm not trying to be funny, but it naturally is, because you're invited to come speak, and you really are concerned about kids and the health of kids. And I'm a health and PE teacher, so to go back to your question, I get off a little bit sometimes, folks, sorry. But I get excited.
Your colleagues.
Your colleagues. I'm sorry, say that again?
Your colleagues.
My colleagues, yeah. So poor Tyson has to sit through all this stuff with me, but I apologize. But to be honest, it's been very loving, very little backlash, and at the end of the day, a lot of folks agree with what we're doing up here, and they really believe in the freedom of speech and freedom of religion. So,
Monica?
I would echo the same. I have had, a little backlash here and there, probably a few colleagues who I would say are maybe a little chillier towards me than they used to be, but in general, they have been very, more than civil, and I have certainly had a lot of support from many of my colleagues who have just come quietly and said, thank you for standing up, I appreciate what you're doing, I respect what you're doing, keep fighting the good fight. They don't feel like they can speak up, so they say thank you for being our voice. And so that is very encouraging to have their voices there to say, we're here to support you. And I've even had some come and say, hey, I just want you to know we don't see eye to eye on these things, but I respect you standing up and speaking up and doing it well. So,
great. Kim?
My situation, my school is probably a little more left-leaning, and I know at the beginning of the year it was very quiet. But everyone's very professional, and at the end of the day, we're all there for the kids, and people have been very respectful. And the thing that's been really a blessing for me is that not a week has gone by where somebody hasn't come in to my room or in school, or sometimes out of school. I've run into somebody or whatever where they've said thank you and we support you, and thank goodness that somebody's standing up for this, because it's not sitting well with so many people.
I think a lot of parents felt this way too, that there was a lack of conversation in the body at the school board level, right? There was little conversation going on there among the elected folks. And so your example of demonstrating a different viewpoint that is still loving and compassionate and valid was very much needed in that moment. And I can't resist picking up, Ian, on Tanner's invited to speak moment in his previous remarks. There's been some news about parents speaking at school board meetings, and maybe we're about to be uninvited, I'm not sure, but can you speak into that issue of the Department of Justice?
Sure. So, I worked at the Department of Justice in 2017 and 2018 as the Deputy Director of Public Affairs. And it was right around Charlottesville where I had a lot of conversations with the media, because they wanted to know, well, what does it mean when the Attorney General says that this is an act of domestic terrorism? And it's very different than international terrorism, where the State Department makes a list of terrorist organizations, and that allows you to prosecute those cases under terrorism statutes. But there is no domestic terrorism statute. And the reason why is because it involves the United States. And a lot of the actions and activities that could be potentially covered by that are covered by hate crime statutes or civil rights statutes or just general criminal statutes. The reason why there's never been a domestic terrorism statute is because of its susceptibility to be abused, to label political enemies as domestic terrorists. And of course, the back and forth was, well, that's just a hypothetical. Well, it doesn't look like a hypothetical anymore now, does it? And as you saw, the National School Board Association sent a letter to the Department of Justice last week asking for the Justice Department to look at parents across the country speaking out at school board meetings using the powers under domestic terror investigation tools. And the Justice Department complied and immediately sent out a memo from the Attorney General saying that they would do this. Now, first of all, if there is violence at a school board, that is absolutely unacceptable, but it's also a local issue. The rest of what they're talking about, intimidation, harassment, well, what is that? What is harassment? Is that a snarky tweet or Facebook post? What's intimidation? Is that raising your voice at a school board meeting or protesting outside? The bottom line is this has a chilling effect. People are going to wonder, if I raise my voice, as Keisha said earlier, is the FBI going to be showing up at my door? It is frightening. But parents aren't going to stop because at the end of the day, they're parents. And their children are their first and most important responsibility. And so the federal government is not going to cower us with these kind of tactics and, quite frankly, ploys. We're going to keep standing up and we're going to keep exercising our rights to get results and get accountability.
So Tyson, can you give us the state of the case?
Sure. So immediately after Tanner spoke at the school board meeting, he was suspended and he contacted us. We wrote a letter to the school board and said, hey, you violated Tanner's rights. You cannot punish him for speaking at a public forum. Please reinstate him. They refused to do so. We immediately filed a lawsuit and a motion for a preliminary injunction asking the court to reinstate them and reinstate Tanner. Thankfully, the court agreed that the school had likely violated his rights and they reinstated Tanner so that he was able to finish out the school year and the final 5 days of his school year in the previous spring. So that was a great news. Unfortunately, the school board didn't take the hint and they appealed that to the Virginia Supreme Court. The Virginia Supreme Court, about a month ago, ruled in our favor and upheld the injunction reinstating Tanner. But again, good news then bad news, good news then bad news. The school, didn't listen to the many parents and teachers that were voicing concerns over this policy, and they actually enacted the policy. And so we modified the lawsuit to add Kim and Monica and to challenge the policy directly. And we've asked for a motion for a preliminary injunction, asking the court to enter an order saying that the school cannot force teachers like Monica and Kim and Tanner to speak things that they disagree with and to say things that are going to be harmful to their students. And we're waiting for the court to set a hearing on that. But we're hopeful that the court will recognize the very strong free speech and free exercise rights that the state of Virginia and the United States has. I mean, so many of our free speech cases, the principal cases relate to education, and the Supreme Court has indicated how important it is that we protect our institutions of education. They said if the academic freedom and our marketplace of ideas, if it is restricted, our nation will shrivel up and it will die. So we cannot do that. We must protect the rights of teachers that are willing to stand up and say, I'm not going to speak untruth to my students. And so we're hopeful that the court will recognize those rights and uphold the rights of all teachers. This isn't just for people that believe the same things that Tanner, Monica, and Kim believe. This is for all teachers, and it's for all parents, and it's for all students to say that the government cannot censor us simply because they don't agree with our viewpoints.
So, Tyson, does this case or one with similar facts have the potential to be heard before the nation's highest court, the Supreme Court?
Well, we think there is a good chance of that because unfortunately, Loudoun is not unique. We have another lawsuit pending right now with Peter Vlaming, who was fired a couple years ago in Williamsburg when he declined to refer to a female student as a male. And that's before the Virginia Supreme Court. As we speak, we're working on drafting that brief. We also represent Professor Nick Merriweather for 20 years, a religion and philosophy professor at Shawnee State University in Ohio. A beloved professor who loves his students just like these teachers do, and he refused to refer to a male as a female student, and they punished him and said that he had created a hostile environment. Thankfully, the Sixth Circuit earlier this spring ruled in his favor and ruled that teachers and professors do have rights in their classrooms, that the government cannot force them to speak things that they disagree with, and has sent it back to the district court. And so the state of the law specifically on this has not been ruled upon by the Supreme Court, but what we do know is the Supreme Court has never allowed the government to force anyone to speak a message that they disagree with. And they say that is offensive to the First Amendment. And they've been very strong about that, so we're hoping that that the courts will recognize that and will recognize the rights of these teachers that are simply just advocating for the good of their students.
Great. So for the teachers again, I was wondering if you all are members of the Virginia Education Association or the Loudoun Teachers Union, and if so, have they done anything to support you in your efforts?
I belong to God. I don't go to the. I don't. LEA and the teachers. We don't. I don't. Yeah. Did you? I belong to God. Yeah.
They're not, I don't feel like it would be in our best interest.
Yeah. Not a member. They don't represent the things that I think are important in education, and so no.
I'll just add that I think it is interesting that unions are designed to protect rights of teachers, right? That's what they were designed for, right? And we're talking about constitutional rights of teachers. And the union has been completely silent on this policy which strips rights from teachers. And I think that will tell you everything you need to know about why they are not members of the union.
And I guess there's been no amici filed from the ACLU, for example, or any other bastion of defending free speech, right? So.
No, there hasn't. Unfortunately, most of the major organizations on these issues have capitulated to these ideologically driven policies, and they've lost what they once stood for. The ACLU once stood for principles that everyone has these rights. I don't care whether I agree with them or not. And many of the attorneys that advocated for some of these free speech, the most leading jurisprudence in free speech, they disagreed with their clients vehemently. Yet they represented them. And today, those organizations are going by the wayside. And so what I think is so important to understand is that every one of us have to have the courage to stand for our convictions, and we cannot allow the ideological motivations of the day to persuade us and dissuade us from what we know is true and what we know is best for our children.
It's clear that the support that you have in your faith community is strong, and I know that the support that you have among many parents in Loudoun County is also very strong. And Ian has done a tremendous amount of work trying to free up some spots on the school board in Loudoun County. And so while we're on the topic of legal issues, why don't you tell us about the good news you've had this week?
Sure. Well, as I'm sure many of you know, in March, we announced our movement to remove 6 of the 9 Loudoun County School Board members based... And And those petitions and this action, to be clear, is not about their policies, which I vehemently disagree with, but it's about their activities and their inactivity as school board members. And we have collected well over 17,000 signatures during that time. We filed our first case against Leesburg Representative Beth Bartz in August. And on Tuesday, we had motions before the court. And there were 3 motions that the judge decided on. The first was Ms. Bart's motion to dismiss our petitions. The judge denied that motion. The second was Fight for School's motion to intervene as a party in the case, to have a seat at the table in this case, because we certainly don't get one at the school board. The judge granted that motion. And the final motion was a motion to disqualify the Commonwealth's attorney for Loudoun County, who would be the one prosecuting this case, and to appoint an independent prosecutor. Again, the judge granted that motion. So now we will go to the discovery phase and presumably trial. But I want to say something about all the volunteers that have gone out there through the heat, the rain. The first day we collected signatures, it was windy, raining, hot, and hailing, all within the same day. And they have just done such great work, as have other people that go to school board meetings, that have signed the petitions, that have attended rallies, that have held events. And we all have different things to do in life. We all have jobs. And you might be a lawyer, or you might be a teacher, or you might be in the tech industry, or you might be a doctor. But here's the thing, you're all in the hero biz now.
So for the teachers, what encouragement would you have for Christian parents who have their children in public schools? What would you say? What would you say to them?
For Christian parents in public schools, I would encourage them that make your kids knowledgeable that they have more First Amendment rights than anybody in their schools, and to be bold, but graceful and loving with their classmates, and be the example that we want to be. And we have the ultimate example of Christ, obviously. But again, I would encourage parents to just, tell your kids to be bold, graceful, and loving, and be an example of Christ. Don't be afraid of consequences. Don't be fearful. And parents, we've got to be examples of that. We really do.
Kim?
I would say I agree with everything that Tanner has said, and I would add just, the faith over fear especially. Don't be afraid to speak up if you see something that concerns you. Be an active parent, be a praying parent, pray over your children. Every day, their friends at school, they are really being bombarded, I'll be honest, from every direction in the public school system, from the signs that say this is a safe place to come out to the books that the kids are offered, really everything. So just be aware that they are being exposed to this, and just open conversations. And I think just the most powerful thing is to keep praying.
I would say, echoing both Kim and Tanner, that the most important thing is for you to be an active and involved parent, and I'm sure you are, you're here. So that is first and foremost, and having those open and honest conversations. So I'm a teacher, I'm gonna give you a resource. That's what teachers do. Here's your resource. I would get the book Mama Bear Apologetics, whether you're a mama bear or a daddy bear. Some of you know it. It is an amazing tool for you and for your family for engaging your kids in this cultural battle. The truth is that this battle is not just ours as the adults. Our kids are in this fight too, whether we like it or not, and they need to be equipped to do battle with bad ideas. And so that book is an excellent resource if you're looking for something to really help you get grounded and to be actively pursuing those conversations with your kids. And I would just say this as an encouragement too. There are Christian teachers in the public schools where your kids go to school. Most of us are, we're pretty open about our faith, particularly with our students. And so tell your kids to seek out the teachers who they know are Christians and to go to them. They will find support from us. Every kid I know who is a Christian or comes to me and says, I'm a Christian too, say, my door is always open. You need anything, whether it's a prayer or a hug or just a listening ear or just want to come by, you come. My door is open for you because we are brothers and sisters in Christ.
And I'm really curious to hear if there's something that you think, some way that we could enter a conversation with those teachers and those interest groups who are on the other side of this issue, who think that it's a good thing to gender affirm children. Do you think there's any way to have a conversation with them, to present our side of the case in a constructive way that could change hearts and minds?
And I'll answer that, and because I absolutely believe that's the case. What we know is that biological sex is immutable. Everybody knows that. They know that deep down. They see that. That's reality. And there's voices telling them that, but there's a lot of voices saying the opposite. So what we need to do is arm ourselves with the information that's out there. The bottom line is the science is on our side, right? The law in Virginia says that the school board was supposed to adopt evidence-based policies in accordance with evidence-based best practices. What we know is the evidence-based best practice is a child that's struggling with gender dysphoria prior to puberty. 80 to 90% of them will choose their biological sex if they are not affirmed in that. If they are affirmed, almost none of them get off that track. They immediately go to puberty blockers, then cross-sex hormones, and then surgery, and then they go to regret. All right, we know that, so we need to arm ourselves with that. The other side is not the enemy. They're blinded by the forces that are telling them lies, and we need to speak the truth. And that's why we need teachers like them out there speaking the truth. We need to be speaking the truth to our children, and we need to arm our children with those facts, because those facts will change minds, and we can win this battle, because we know that when we live in opposition to reality, people will be harmed. Students are being harmed right now by this. So we need to speak truth. And we need to arm ourselves with that truth, because we can change hearts and minds, and I truly believe that.
For our teachers, have you been through any of the professional development that's going to come as a result of the adoption of the policy by Loudoun County on gender identity? Has that started yet? Have you had it previously? Kim?
I got an email this week saying I needed to take care of that. So it's coming. I'm not sure when the due date is on that. But I also saw that there's a second part to the training, so I haven't had a chance to look through that. But once you finish part one, there's going to be part two. And it said something to the effect of speak up. So I don't know what that's going to encourage. But yes, I believe we will have to go through the training at some level, as long as we don't have to say that we're going to comply with it, because I'm not. So,
Tanner?
I'm with Kim. I got an email this week about some trainings that that would violate our faith, but I would like to say this though, like I'm willing to sit down and go through the training. I just can't do anything that violates my faith and say things that are untrue. It's that simple. But I'd be willing And I encourage folks, and if there's teachers or if this is everywhere. This isn't just education, it's everywhere. But like I said, we gotta be salt and light. And I encourage people and encourage myself, I'm speaking to myself here, is that to still sit through the trainings and show that, hey, I'm gonna work with you here. I'm gonna do the best that I can. I mean, we're asking for religious accommodations. We need to show people the love of Christ and that we still care about everybody regardless of who they are. I'm still gonna sit through the training, and I'm still gonna, be a good example to my school, because I still love my coworkers and my peers, and I'm gonna, show them I want to be there for them, and I want to be there for the school culture.
I'll just add on there that, just to be very clear of the accommodation we're requesting, it's a very narrow accommodation. Every one of these teachers here are willing to refer to a student with any name that they want. They're simply asking not to use a pronoun that's inconsistent with their biological sex. That's it. They're going to treat these students with love and respect and treat them like every other student. They just don't want to say something they think is untrue and that will harm students. And they will comply with these other policies. They just can't say something that's going to violate their faith and it's going to force them to say something untrue. It's very narrow.
Well, we only have about 3 minutes left, and I was told before coming out here that I'm the only thing standing between you and dinner. So I will not open another topic for discussion tonight, but I will thank our panelists very much for being here and for what they're doing on this issue.
Hey guys, before you leave, real quick, a very important announcement we're going to add, real quick.
Well, just as fate would have it, there is a school board meeting in Fairfax County tonight. It's at Luther Jackson Middle School in Merrifield. You can put it in your maps if you feel like going. And there's a rally at 6 p.m., parents' rally at 6 p.m. So I don't know if anybody's from out of town, they feel like a field trip, or anybody from Loudoun's ready to go. But I just thought I would let you know that that's happening, and you'll meet friends there for sure.
Thank you, Meg. Great job, Meg. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to do this in 60 seconds, but before we start the clock, and Bob, could you go ahead and set up, give me 1 minute, and I'm going to do it. I want to just I just want to say thank you. You guys have been awesome today. You've been so patient, so kind, so attentive, so responsive, and we greatly appreciate it. So thank you very, very much. Okay, you're going to get your announcements in a minute. We'll be back in 2 hours for our evening session. Are you ready? Someone time me. Here I go. Okay, here we go. Ready? Book signing tonight. Ali Stuckey. This is tomorrow night. Ali Stuckey, 9:30 in the atrium. Also, book signing with Al Robertson. That is tonight at 9:30 in the atrium. Don't forget, there's Washington Watch. You can watch it from 5 until 6 in the cafe with Tony Perkins Live. For those who ordered a box dinner from Mission Barbecue, just go to the cafe for distribution of the dinners. You must present your ticket to pick up your free dinner. You may sit in the cafe during the radio show, room 700 at the top of the stairs of the beautiful church grounds. For those who didn't order a dinner, I'm so sorry, but you do have a listing of restaurants within a 3-mile radius. Take your materials with you. Keep the sanctuary clean. We'll convene at 7 o'clock with praise and worship by Cornerstone and an awesome lineup. Thank you and goodbye.
was lost in the darkness, searching for something, searching for something. To be the love I was missing, but there was nothing, but there was nothing. And there in my searching, I'm running in circles and still feeling empty inside. You showed me the love I was longing for all of my life. And I just want to tell you, you're perfect in all your ways. You captivate me. No one else can satisfy me like you do, oh God. We will sing of your greatness, 'cause you are holy, 'cause you are holy. We will not stay silent, 'cause you are worthy, 'cause you are worthy. Your love is the compass, you're leading me forward. You're with me in everything. You're right there beside me, my strength in the darkest of nights. And I just want to tell you, you're perfect in all your ways. You captivate me. No one else can satisfy me like you do, oh God. I just want to tell you, you're perfect in all your ways. You captivate me. No one else can satisfy me like you do, oh God. 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 Breathe on me, Holy One. Come reveal your wonder now. Open wide my eyes to see. There's so much more. Jesus, you are where it all begins. Your beauty calls me deeper in. Stir a passion in my heart, God. Let it overflow. Let it overflow. Stir a passion in my heart, God. You don't need wisdom, you don't need power, just my yes and amen. My life in your hands, not perfection, not ambition, just my yes and amen. My life in your hands. Do everything you've promised, to all that you desire. Yes and amen. Yes and amen. Yes and amen. Yes and amen. Take my moments, take my future. I'll say yes and amen to all you've planned. Take my weakness, take my failure, from beginning to end. My whole life in your hand. To everything you've called us, to all that you command. Yes and amen. Yes and amen. Yes and amen. Yes and amen. You are the potter, I am the clay. Show me your will, Lord, I will obey. You are the potter, I am the clay. Show me your will, Lord, I will obey. Yes and amen. Yes and amen. Yes and amen. Yes and to everything you've promised, to all that you desire, to everything you've called us, to all